Long before humans ruled the earth, monsters walked among us. From deep-sea terrors that swallowed whales whole to apex predators that shook the ground with every step, these are the real-life giants that time forgot. Welcome to the ultimate compilation of history's most terrifying prehistoric creatures.
The beast of Peru. 39 million years ago, the heaviest animal that ever lived swam through the ocean above what is now Peru. Scientists think it was even bigger than the blue whale, which is quite a statement since blue whales are the biggest animals that have ever existed. Not just during our lifetime, but ever. Peru's Ica Valley was completely flooded in prehistoric times, making it a vibrant ocean teeming with majestic creatures and real sea monsters. These days, the ocean is long gone. The floor of that ancient ocean is now the Ica Desert, a place where scientists frequently pull fossils out of the rock. It was scientists from the University of Pisa who uncovered the fossilized remains of what could be the largest whale ever. Researchers uncovered a set of unusually dense whale bones. From the very beginning, they understood the bones were definitely from a cetacean, but not from any cetacean alive right now. This creature was really strange looking. It was stout and unusually proportioned. Scientists believe it was probably about 15 feet shorter than a modern blue whale, but it was 3 times heavier. Just try to picture in your head how big this animal was. 3 times heavier than a blue whale is shocking and doesn't even seem scientifically possible. Researchers believe the massive sea creature had a set of legs on the bottom of its body that it used to scramble across the seabed. It was so heavy, it had to have legs to propel itself along. The skeleton pulled out of the Peruvian desert weighed roughly 8 tons. To give you some perspective, its skeleton is roughly 3 times heavier than the skeletal structure of the biggest dinosaurs known to science. A single vertebra uncovered by the team weighed over 200 pounds. That's like if a single piece of your spine was so large it could only be picked up and moved using a crane. The other Rexes. In Morocco, the fossils of 2 relatives of the famous Tyrannosaurus rex were recently discovered. The fossils are from 2 totally new dinosaur species, further fueling the evidence that Morocco was one of the most dangerous places on the planet during the age of the dinosaurs. These new fossils were uncovered outside Casablanca. Both of them belong to the larger Abelisauridae family. They were carnivorous predators fairly similar to tyrannosaurs in North America, only on the other side of the world, and they had weirdly stubby faces like bulldogs. These were the other T-Rexes, dominating Africa at the end of the Cretaceous. One of the new predators was fairly short, only about 15 feet long, but it's the diversity that is truly impressive. Dr. Nick Longrich from the University of Bath said a lot of dinosaurs are being discovered in this part of Morocco. The fossils are in a weird location, found at the bottom of a shallow tropical sea that was once full of sharks and mosasaurs. So many ferocious carnivores have been found from the same time and in the same place. Their coexistence is baffling. All these different Abelisaurus were predatory monsters, yet they all thrived in the same place. There must have been an abundance of food to sustain a diverse population of apex predators. In most cases, one major predator reaches the top of the food chain and dominates an area, maybe 2. But 66 million years ago in Morocco, there were too many apex predators to count. This may have been the most diverse piece of property of the Cretaceous world, and definitely one of the more dangerous places to be if you're not a predator. Sadly, their evolutionary superiority didn't protect them from the cataclysm of the asteroid impact. The pliosaur skull, a beast of preposterous proportions, was found on England's Jurassic coast. No, it isn't the English version of Jurassic Park. It's a coastline, so rich in fossils that it's considered one of the best places to scavenge for prehistoric remains in the world. Scientists have found a lot of stuff here, but nothing that compares to this most recent find. They unearthed the fossilized skull of one of the most dangerous predators this world has ever seen. The discovery was so amazing that Sir David Attenborough himself investigated. Paleontologists collected the skull of a pliosaur from the cliff at the edge of the beach. The skull is 150 million years old. For eons and eons, it remained entombed within the cliffs. Millions of years of erosion have now revealed the monster for the first time. When it was alive, the pliosaur was one of the scariest things in the ocean. How exactly did paleontologists go about pulling a dinosaur skull from a cliff? The discovery was a little less sophisticated than you might think. A fossil enthusiast was poking around on the beach near Cambridge Bay when they came across the snout of the pliosaur. The enthusiast alerted the proper authorities. What followed was an intense extraction project from halfway down the eroding cliff. Paleontologists dangled from ropes as they slowly and carefully prepped the fossil for removal. Then they had to lift the skull to the top of the cliff for transport. This wasn't a simple afternoon job. I'd say my favorite thing about this particular skull is that you don't need an imagination to see how frightening the pliosaur was. Its skull is so perfectly preserved, you can see its crocodile-like jaw, jammed full of over 100 teeth. You can even see the big holes on the side of its skull that were once filled with muscles used to crunch prey. Researchers think its bite force was in the same range as the T-Rex. In other words, the pliosaur was the Rex of the sea. Its skull is around 10 feet long, which means its body was probably about 40 feet long. Mystery claw. 50 years ago, a mysterious claw was discovered in the province of British Columbia. Now it has been identified as belonging to a cousin of Triceratops. This bizarre creature is the first unique dinosaur ever discovered in British Columbia. It lived 67 million years ago and was so adorable it doesn't even make sense. The claw was discovered buried in some rocks along the edge of a rail line in the wilderness near Smithers. But because this was so long ago, there wasn't much scientists could do with a random claw, so it went into storage and remained there until recently. Victoria Arbour and a group of her colleagues came across the claw and were captivated by it. They recently wrapped up several years of analysis, which led to the naming of the new species. It's called Pherosaurus sustenensis, which translates to iron lizard from the Sistut River. Other than the claw, researchers have a couple of toe bones and some shoulder bones, but that's it. These small fragmented bones can fit in a pizza box, yet they are the only things remaining of an entire species. That's how rare dinosaur bones really are. Most scientists agree that only a tiny fraction of ancient species are known to modern scientists. Humans will most likely never identify all the dinosaurs and prehistoric beasts that once roamed the lands. But just how adorable was Pherosaurus? It looked very similar to Triceratops, but was more cartoonish. It had a short frill, no horns on its face, and a parrot-like beak. And although it lumbered around on 4 legs, it likely had the ability to walk upright. Imagine a Triceratops without the horns and waddling around on 2 legs. Aw, the Utah dino. In the state of Utah, a dinosaur species from 100 million years ago has been discovered. The new species is as new as it gets, with not a single other specimen known. Scientists named the creature Iani Smithi. The dinosaur wasn't nearly as frightening or ferocious as some of the dinos on our list today, but it was a hungry plant eater. This particular fellow was a juvenile, about 10 feet long and tough as nails. Lindsay Sano from the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences said Iani Smithi had powerful jaws for crunching through plant material. It was a type of ornithopod, which are more casually known as duck-billed dinosaurs. It may have been related to other duck-billed creatures like the Edmontosaurus from Canada. The dinosaur isn't particularly unique, seeing as there were lots of duck-billed dinosaurs around. Still, it lived in an interesting time. It was alive during the last part of the Cretaceous, from 145 to about 66 million years ago. Iani Smithi lived through a significant warming period, then died with the asteroid that killed the rest of the dinosaurs. This particular time in Earth's history was extremely volatile. Lindsay said the planet suddenly experienced a temperature spike, which is known as the Cretaceous thermal maximum. From out of nowhere, greenhouse gas concentrations spiked. Greenhouse gas levels were about 4 times higher than they are today, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. Also, the sea level was way higher. Not a few feet higher, as in maybe expect some light flooding. The sea level was about 1,000 feet higher than it is right now. Just try to picture what the Earth would look like today if it was under 1,000 extra feet of water. Oh, and I can't forget to mention the poles. The North Pole and South Pole were blanketed with sweltering hot rainforests. A journey across the North Pole would be like trying to walk through the jungle from Vietnam to Cambodia. The main thing to remember is that the Earth is always changing. This mysterious duck-billed dinosaur from Utah lived in a climate that was so hot and humid that modern humans almost certainly wouldn't be able to survive it. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Michael Bryant and Yellow Ant for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos about prehistoric creatures. The ancient river dolphin. Scientists at the Smithsonian have revealed a totally new species of river dolphin that they have named Isthminia panamensis. Fossil fragments taken from Panama helped reveal not just a species new to science, but insight into the evolution of freshwater river dolphins. The fossil is roughly 6 million years old. It was found on the coast of the small Caribbean town of Pina. The fossil consists of a partial skull still connected to the lower jaw, with one nearly complete set of teeth. Plus, the skull is connected to the right shoulder blade and 2 small bones from the dolphin's flipper. It's called a single fossil because all the pieces are still fused together, even though the bones are from different parts of the body. In total, the dolphin was probably about 9 feet long. Right now, there is only a small handful of river dolphin species remaining in our world. Humans have destroyed the rivers with such ferocity that only 3 remain for sure. The Chinese river dolphin is likely extinct, since it hasn't been seen in decades. The other 3 are all considered endangered. The fossil from Panama shows that river dolphins were widespread across the planet. It belonged to a group of dolphins who only recently transitioned from living in the vast saltwater expanse of the ocean. It looked similar to dolphins in the ocean, but was in the midst of developing a longer and more narrow snout, just like what modern river dolphins have. The longer snout is better for navigating and hunting in windy rivers. This river dolphin has given scientists a clear timeline for when dolphins started invading the rivers of the world. About 6 million years ago, they started adapting to places like the Amazon, living in the bountiful river systems. Tyrannosaur drumsticks. What's your favorite part of the chicken? Do you consider yourself a wing fan, or maybe a drumstick is more your fancy? Paleontologists at the Royal Tyrrell Museum in Canada have just made a shocking discovery about the tyrannosaur. It turns out the preferred meal of tyrannosaur teenagers was the drumstick. It all started with a cleaning technician. The technician was cleaning the fossil of a Gorgosaurus libratus when he noticed small toe bones coming out of the rib cage. The technician called a meeting where it was decided the specimen would be flipped over. From there, things took a juicy twist. According to Dr. Francois Terrien, the curator of dinosaur paleontology, 2 leg bones were discovered. These small leg bones were basically dinosaur drumsticks. Although the Gorgosaurus was young, it still weighed about 740 pounds, and yet it was 1/8 the size of a full adult. These things were the most ferocious carnivores of North America 75 million years ago, long before the more famous T-Rex showed up on the scene. An adult Gorgosaurus libratus grew over 30 feet long and weighed over 3 tons. But when you put it beside its close relative Albertosaurus, the Gorgosaurus libratus is still considered a junior carnivore. The drumsticks in its ribcage were found to be from the bird-like herbivore Cytipes elegans. Dr. Terrien said the legs suggest juvenile Gorgosaurus were fond of drumsticks specifically. The dinosaur may have pulled the legs from the little bird on purpose. swallowed them whole, and discarded the rest of the carcass. To put things as simply and as grotesquely as possible, this young dinosaur wandered around prehistoric Canada biting the legs off birds. Then they left their mutilated bodies for the scavengers to pick clean. The prehistoric Spanish cat. An entirely new species of prehistoric cat has been discovered in Spain. It lived about 15.5 million years ago and was fairly similar to a modern Iberian lynx. It wasn't particularly big, but it was still ferocious. Scientists have named the new cat Whiskers Meow Wow. I'm just kidding. It's named Majeri Felis Pygnae. Although the new cat was only recently identified, its fossilized remains were uncovered over a decade ago in 2007. That's how long it takes to get from the fossil being discovered to a new animal being confirmed. Scientists had to analyze its partial jawbones, look at its teeth, and put together all the different clues. Scientists think it hunted with a very specific technique. It likely went straight for the throat, crunching its victim's neck with a series of intense bites. But what did the prehistoric feline look like? I would love to tell you how strange and unique the cat was, but that simply isn't the case. Majeri Felis Pygnae looked really similar to a modern house cat, just with bigger teeth and a much feistier attitude. The giant millipede. These days, England is not home to very many frightening animals. It doesn't have leagues of toxic serpents slithering through the grass. There are no more bears in the British Isles, nor are there terrifying sea creatures beyond its shores. But that wasn't always the case. England was home to the biggest bug that ever lived. A nightmare-inducing creepy crawly you're going to wish you'd never heard of. Neil Davies from the University of Cambridge said it was a complete fluke of a discovery. In 2018, a piece of sandstone fell from a seaside cliff onto the beach. The stone split open, revealing what kind of looks like a fossilized track from a tank's treads. But really, it's the fossilized body of a giant millipede. These new discoveries are proving that England is home to some seriously creepy fossilized monsters. But just how big of a millipede was this thing? Could it have eaten an entire person? Let me put it this way. The fossil was so big, it took 4 people to carry it. The millipede, scientific name Arthropleura, lived during the Carboniferous period, 326 million years ago. This was a time when creepy crawlies grew to behemoth proportions. The abundance of oxygen helped creatures grow way bigger than they do now. 100 million years before the first dinosaur, bugs as big as cars were as common as the squirrels down at your local park. This millipede was roughly 8.6 feet long. Now, I know what you're thinking. It was 8.6 feet long, but as a millipede, it probably weighed a couple pounds and was really skinny. That is incorrect. The freakish bug weighed at least 110 pounds and was just as frightening as the worst thing you can imagine. Think about the implication of its size. To grow so big, Arthropleura must have eaten a very nutritious diet. 300 million years ago, Britain was on the equator. The landmass was covered in a lush jungle and filled with early amphibians and some of the first invertebrates. The immense scope of life allowed giant bugs to have a constant source of food for growing big and strong. The Egyptian mini whale. Africa is home to some of the biggest and oldest whales that have ever lived. I don't mean the coast of Africa. Most of the whales I'm talking about are found in the desert. For example, Tutsitus ryanensis. This miniature whale lived 41 million years ago and was recently found fossilized in Egypt. The fossil of the mini whale was discovered near Wadi El Hitan, one of the most densely concentrated whale graveyards in the world. When I say fossil, what I really mean is one tooth and a few bones. A team of scientists from Mansoura University uncovered a single exposed tooth in a chunk of limestone, then the rest of the fossils. The tooth belonged to a previously unknown whale species belonging to an extinct group called Basilisaurid. Scientists believe Basilisaurid were some of the first whales to live strictly in the water. They were the initial descendants of land whales, the forerunners of whales who stomped around on land with legs. Believe it or not, Egypt has some of the greatest fossils of 4-legged whales anywhere in the world. How, you wonder? It's because the Sahara Desert was at the bottom of the ocean between about 60 and 30 million years ago. The tiny whale only weighed 400 pounds and was a measly 8 feet long. It's the smallest known member of its order. That being said, it's also the oldest fully aquatic whale specimen ever discovered in Africa. This creature's single tooth is a snapshot of evolution itself. This was one of the first whales to brave the depths of the sea with its legs that hadn't totally become flippers yet. Scientists named it after Pharaoh Tutankhamun. Fossils in whales. Forget about fossils of whales. Let's check out some fossils in whales. In 2023, archaeologists uncovered 150 unknown fossilized species at a marine archaeological site. The fossils are majorly old, from about 462 million years ago. Although scientists don't know precisely what species the fossils belong to, they do know what kinds of creatures they were. These are the fossilized remains of starfish, sponges, and worms. And don't forget a few barnacles, too. These marine animals come from a critical time in the history of Earth. They came into existence during the Ordovician era, just after the Cambrian period. Life on the planet had exploded in a big way, but it hadn't made it to land yet. The only complex animals alive were dwelling in the oceans. It was a time when shrimps, algae, fish, and early sea beasts started to diversify in an exciting way. This new treasure trove of fossilized life was found in a quarry, a popular fossil deposit named Castle Bank. The initial discovery was made in 2013 by a research fellow from the local university. He spotted a sponge and collected a few small fossils, but there wasn't a real study done until COVID-19. That was when the lockdown gave scientists time to investigate. Now they have found nearly 200 animals that nobody has ever identified before. Some of these creatures had soft bodies and were tiny, only a millimeter in length. Others evolved to have tough skin and exoskeletons. As a collection, the fossils are unprecedented. They represent a cornucopia of early life forms, living creatures who got their start 500 million years ago. Scientists are hoping to continue identifying the animals and just maybe help unravel the secrets of life itself. The chicken from hell. The Midwest isn't a particularly dangerous place these days when it comes to giant birds. But if you lived in South Dakota 100 million years ago in the Cretaceous period, you might not have lasted very long. There was a chicken from hell that roamed the Dakotas and feasted on anything it pleased. It was a dinosaur that looked like a chicken. It was 170 pounds and covered in thick feathers. The fossilized remains of this previously unknown monstrosity were recently unearthed in Meade County, where the legendary Hell Creek Formation is. The formation is famous because something happened here millions of years ago that caused a lot of old plants and animals to become fossilized. Researchers from Oklahoma State University were the ones who came across the ancient bones. They originally thought they were looking at a dinosaur called Anzu wylie. But no, it's a totally new species, a terrifying chicken from the depths of your worst nightmare. Scientists say the hellbird is a caenagnathed, part of the larger Oviraptorosaur family. Or, in plain English, a human-sized chicken with lanky arms and hands that could grasp. The thought of a giant chicken is frightening enough without dexterous hands. The chicken could have picked you up and looked you straight in your eyes before it ate you. Scientists have named the new species Eoniophron infernalis, which translates to Pharaoh's Dawn Chicken from Hell. The gluttonous ichthyosaur. An ancient marine reptile known as an ichthyosaur had a truly legendary last meal. It was a last meal so epic that I'm telling you about it today, 240 million years after the fact. The ichthyosaur, a creature kind of like a vicious version of a dolphin, bit off way more than it could chew. The ichthyosaur was 15 feet long, comparable to a canoe. When scientists began looking at its fossilized remains, which were found in China, they were shocked to find a big bulge in its belly. But this sea monster wasn't pregnant. Its belly contained the undigested remains of a lizard-like reptilian creature called thalattosaur. It was only about 3.5 feet shorter than the ichthyosaur. This incredible failed snack has broken a bunch of records. Scientists believe it's the oldest evidence of a marine reptile eating an animal bigger than a human. It's also the longest known prey of a marine reptile from the dinosaur age. Never before has such a large creature been found consumed by a marine animal alive alongside dinosaurs. It was such a ridiculously large meal that the ichthyosaur died trying to swallow it. Scientists are baffled as to why the ichthyosaur would even attempt such an impossible feat. According to Ryosuke Motani from the University of California, blunt teeth suggest they were better off eating soft creatures like cephalopods. Scientists didn't think that blunt teeth could be used for eating larger, more solid prey. Maybe the ichthyosaur was bored of its usual food and wanted to try something new. Maybe the smaller reptile was an enemy of the ichthyosaur. After a brutal fight, perhaps the ichthyosaur decided to eat its nemesis. What do you think happened here? Why would an animal eat another animal that could barely fit in its stomach? Let me know what you think happened in the comments. Dinosaur super senses. Some dinosaurs had what you might consider supernatural abilities, or super senses, if you will. Dinosaurs like Thescelosaurus neglectus, whose sense of smell was unparalleled among dinosaurs. A recent study of its skull fossil at the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences revealed the incredible nasal powers of this tiny ancient beast. Researchers at the university used the CT scanner to reconstruct the soft tissue within the specimen's ancient skull. Then they compared the sensory structures to other dinosaurs. They also looked at their closest living relatives to determine the size of the dinosaur's brain, what her balance was like, and what her smell was like. Did I mention she was a lady dinosaur named Willow? According to Lindsay Zano, the team uncovered that Willow had the uncanny ability to hear low-frequency sounds. But there was one aspect of her hearing in particular that caught scientists by surprise. To understand this, you first need to understand that not all dinosaurs had the same hearing abilities. They all evolved differently, so certain dinosaurs made sounds that the rest of the dinosaurs couldn't hear. Scientists are fairly certain that many dinosaurs communicated with one another like modern birds, tweeting and roaring and making vocalizations. Willow was able to pick up a wide range of frequencies, including the frequency at which the T-Rex vocalized. This means that Willow had likely adapted to recognize the vocalization of an apex predator. Being a small, burrowing dinosaur who mostly lived underground, this was a big tactical advantage. Thescelosaurus would have easily been able to avoid running into a T-Rex by listening for it. But what about the smell? Its sense of smell has been described as overdeveloped. It could smell everything. This was likely because it was a burrowing animal. Even today, animals that spend a significant amount of time underground often have a heightened sense of smell. This new study is the first time scientists have linked digging, burrowing, and super smell back to a dinosaur. The ancient sturgeon. Just outside the Canadian city of Edmonton, dinosaur capital of the Great White North, hikers came across a fossilized skull. A couple of weekend warriors were hiking Capilano Park when they stumbled upon the remains of a fish that lived 70 million years ago. Paleontologists from the University of Alberta confirmed the fossils belong to a prehistoric sturgeon. You may have eaten a sturgeon before, as they are a hugely popular fish. They are the biggest fish in Alberta, growing over 10 feet long. Sadly, they are currently at risk. It takes 25 years for sturgeon to reach breeding age, meaning it's difficult for their numbers to stay positive with all the fishing. But what's really crazy is just how long they've been around. Lake sturgeon have been in the river systems of Saskatchewan since before the dinosaurs went extinct. And not just in the western provinces, they've lived all over the world. A similar fossil was recently discovered in Morocco, this one a little younger. It was from 66 million years ago and represented the first sturgeon ever found in Africa. Even though there's only one fossil, there were likely millions or billions of these fish living in African river systems throughout history. Scientists believe that sturgeons have been around for 200 million years. There's a very good reason that fishermen refer to them nowadays as living fossils. The shrew. I'm going to introduce you now to a prehistoric creature that some might call boring. This creature was kind of like a shrew, or maybe a little more like a mouse. It was small, weighed about the same as a feather, and dwelled in the harsh Arctic environment. During the Cretaceous era, the ice mouse lived in burrows under the soil in total darkness for months at a time. 73 million years ago, the ice mouse was one of the smallest yet most fascinating inhabitants of ancient Alaska. It had an extraordinary sense of smell, just like Thescelosaurus. It used its keen senses to navigate the prehistoric forests, burrowing underneath the leaves and scavenging in the soil for worms and insects. But what was it like to be in Alaska before the death of the dinosaurs? The truth is that Alaska wasn't that much different from what it is now. It was full of birds and mammals like it is today. Only it also had some significantly humongous dinosaurs. The land territory of Alaska extended higher into the north, much deeper into the Arctic. Every winter, the land was plunged into inescapable darkness for 4 long months. During those dark months, the ice mouse lived peacefully underground. It only weighed about 11 grams, the same as 2 thin sheets of copy paper. Scientists were lucky they found the animal at all. A couple of its teeth were uncovered by paleontologists from the University of Alaska while sifting through dirt at the banks of a river on the northern coast. This was a very remote area, about 75 miles from Dead Horse. The place is accessible only by bush plane or snowmobile. As they sifted through the dirt, 2 tiny fragments captured a researcher's eye. They were tiny teeth from the ice mouse, each one no bigger than a grain of sand. The ice mouse is changing how scientists view Arctic animals. The assumption used to be that animals grew much larger in Arctic areas. The larger the creature, the greater its fat stores for hibernation. But this tiny mouse didn't have any fat stores. It was small and couldn't even hibernate. Scientists think it must have fallen into a state of reduced activity in the winter to stay alive. Now, scientists are curious what other small creatures may have lived in prehistoric Alaska that have yet to be found. Feathered scare tactics. Scientists recently completed an exciting new study that involved a robot dinosaur named Robopteryx. The robotic dino was used to copy ancient dinosaur behaviors, allowing researchers to gain insight into the evolution of feathered wings. The reason being that scientists have always wondered what the original point of having feathers was. Wings can grow without feathers, suggesting they were for something other than flight. As it turns out, feathers may have been used as scare tactics by early dinosaurs. The new research is supporting a theory that not all scientists have agreed with. That theory is that wings didn't evolve for the purpose of flight, but rather for hunting. Small dinosaurs who hunted insects and tiny creatures likely began growing wings so that they could startle their prey out of hiding places. Picture a raptor about as tall as your knee standing before a crop of tall grass. It wants the bugs that are in the grass but doesn't know how to get to them. With its wings, the dinosaur flaps furiously, freaking out the bugs so that they jump out of their hiding places. Bam! The dinosaur just scared dinner right into its mouth. Scientists confirmed this worked using Robopteryx. They equipped the robot dinosaur with feathered wings and then observed how grasshoppers responded to its scare tactics. Sure enough, the grasshoppers behaved in a way that would have yielded the robot dinosaur a tasty meal. The end result of the study proves dinosaurs likely developed feathers to scare bugs. But this isn't the only proof to support the theory. Only a handful of feathered dinosaurs have ever been found. And so far, only a single group of dinosaurs have been found with pennaceous feathers, which are required for flying. The rest of the feathered dinosaurs had feathers that didn't even work in the sky. Simba. How much do you think an average house cat weighs? Spoiler alert, it's not a lot. It's definitely not more than a ton, which is how much an ancient cat just discovered in a museum weighed. This previously unknown feline foe was bigger than a tiger. It was bigger than a lion. It was even bigger than a polar bear. It may have been the most unstoppable cat in the history of the planet. Scientists say its skull was about the size of the skull of a rhinoceros, yet it was as nimble as your average cat. This cat was so impressive that scientists needed a good name for it. They opted to call it Simba Kubwa Kutokafrika, clearly inspired by the Lion King. But unlike most awesome discoveries, the cat wasn't found in the field. It had been previously excavated somewhere in Kenya and stashed in a random drawer at the National Museum of Kenya. Researchers Nancy Stevens and Matthew Borths only had to open the drawer to make the discovery. I asked you earlier how much an average house cat weighs, but I didn't give you an answer. Now, I want to break down some cat weights so you can truly understand how biblically enormous the prehistoric Simba was. Your average house cat weighs something like 8 pounds. A snow leopard can weigh up to 110 pounds. The mountain lions that stalk North America grow to a maximum of 175 pounds. Your average lion is only about 400 pounds, while the biggest tiger on record weighed an astounding 715 pounds. Tigers are the biggest and most dangerous of all the big cats. All these animals pale in comparison to Simba, who weighed roughly 2,888 pounds. That is 3 times heavier than the biggest tiger on record. Comparing it to an average lion is laughable. It was 7 times heftier than the typical lion you see on an African safari. For a time, these big cats were the apex predators in Africa. They belonged to a larger mammal family called hyaenodonts. After the dinosaurs went extinct, hyaenodonts took charge of Africa as the most ferocious creatures around. For 45 million years, they dominated the continent. There is a very high possibility that while Simba Kubwa was alive, herbivore species were unable to get a foothold. Early primates and plant-eating mammals would not have had much room to evolve because they were constantly eaten. But then, about 18 million years ago, hyaenodonts suddenly went extinct for unknown reasons, probably because they ate everything. It was only when these huge cats were out of the picture that monkeys started to make huge strides in evolution. This ultimately led to human beings. Human progress was literally stunted because there were giant cats running around. And now for number 7. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Sienna and Heather. I'm so glad you're able to watch the channel together. Hopefully it's not too scary. And also a big thank you to Susie Milford for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. The gorilla horse. There used to be a creature that lived on this planet and can only be described as a hybrid gorilla horse. Or maybe it was more like a hybrid horse-gorilla. I guess it's all a matter of perspective. Either way, this hoofed monstrosity was a beast. Its face was distinctively horse-like. It had a bulging belly. It also had arms significantly longer than its legs, allowing it to amble around on its fists just like a modern gorilla. It sounds like a creature straight out of Greek mythology, but was a very real animal known as a chelocothere. These creatures were part of a group of perissodactyls. The word sounds like pterodactyls, but the two weren't even remotely close. Pterodactyls were flying reptiles, and perissodactyls are all animals related to horses and rhinoceroses. The gorilla horse evolved at around the same time as the ancestors of modern horses. They would have come into the picture around 46 million years ago. Then, before long, they had branched into 2 separate groups. One lived in the grasslands, while the other meandered through the ancient forests. They also spread across the entire planet, appearing everywhere from North America to Asia. Even weirder is that Chelocothere had a feeding habit much more similar to modern pandas than either a horse or a gorilla. They used their long arms and claws to strip vegetation off long branches. Their claws were so big that they had to walk on their knuckles. Chelicotheres resembled horses, mostly in color and physical appearance, but they wandered around with the gait of a gorilla and feasted on trees like panda bears. Oh yeah, and don't forget, Chelicothere also had a sloping back, similar to that of the giraffe. It's a wonder these things didn't survive into modern times, given they had so many distinctive animal traits. Researchers think the very last of their kind disappeared from China just 8,000 years ago. The tree-climbing crocodile. I'm going to tell you something about crocodiles that you might not know and that you might not want to know. Brace yourselves, modern crocodiles can climb trees. It's a phenomenon that has been very well documented. Not only can crocodiles attack you from the water, but they can also get you from a tree canopy when you think you're safe. It's a little-known fact that makes the ancient reptiles so much more frightening. The reason I'm telling you this is because I wanted to introduce you to an extinct prehistoric crocodile from Australia that had a knack for tree climbing. It's called Trilophosuchus rakami. It lived between 23 and 5 million years ago. But unlike modern crocodiles in Australia, this thing was tiny. It was a dwarf species of crocodile, hardly taller than a person's ankle. It had a short snout, distinctive ridges on the top of its skull, and it may have spent a lot of time in the trees. Scientists have suggested it was arboreal, meaning it liked to lounge on tree branches, like an iguana. It's only a theory, so I can't tell you for sure that the tiny crocodile lived in trees. What I can say is that it was, without a doubt, one of the cutest crocodiles that ever evolved. Associate Professor Steve Salisbury from Australia said if you were to travel back in time, 13 million years, there would be ferocious crocodiles at the edge of the water. Crocodiles that could definitely eat you, but you'd also have to watch yourself in the forest because you might accidentally step on the tiny Trilophosuchus. This thing was more like an adorable lizard than a crocodile, but still not very fun if it lands on your head. The giant terror bird. People spend a lot of time worrying about sharks and bears, but birds are the far more fearsome predators. Humans don't have to worry about being attacked by giant birds these days, unless they live somewhere near cassowaries or ostriches or magpies. But 50 million years ago, the world was dominated by birds, and until very recently, terror birds were a serious threat to humanity. Terror birds included all large flightless birds that hunted across the globe. The scientific name for these horrible creatures was Phorusrhacids. Out of all the demonic feathered predators that lived, the biggest demon of them all was Kelenken guillermoi. Kelenken lived 15 million years ago. This feathered monstrosity was the epitome of almost 40 million years of terror bird evolution. Most of its fossils have been found in South America, but they first identified in 2007. In the last decade, scientists have been hard at work recreating what this awful creature looked like. It was not a pretty animal. Kelenken towered over an average human being. It grew over 10 feet tall. You would have had to crane your neck all the way back just to look up at the bottom of this thing's beak. As it stared back down at you with its beady bird eyes, its beak, which may as well have been of solid steel, was about the size of an average human torso. Its beak was extra strong because it was fused to its skull. Kelenken used it to beat things into submission. In all likelihood, the bird's beak was so deadly that a single blow would knock out any potential prey. The beak also kept the bird free from predators since nobody wanted to be on the receiving end of it, not even Smilodon, aka the saber-toothed tiger. Uintatherium. There is one word that has been used to describe Uintatherium almost universally, and that one word is ugly. I hate to say it, but Uintatherium was a seriously grotesque behemoth. It was also a preposterously large animal that lived 56 million years ago in the Eocene epoch. It was kind of like a rhino, except the size of an elephant and with 3 pairs of horns. It also had a face like a giant spoon. Fossils of this amazing animal were discovered in the Rocky Mountains in northeast Utah and southern Wyoming. It was a member of the Uintatheridae family, of which all of its members are currently extinct. There is not a single animal left alive today directly related to Uintatherium. But why does everybody call it ugly? Partly for its size, but mostly for what was going on with its face. The behemoth stood about 5.6 feet at the shoulders. It wasn't hugely tall, but very hefty. It was 13 feet long and weighed 4,000 pounds. Its legs were thick and sturdy to support all of that weight. From a distance, it wouldn't have looked much different from a rhino, but its skull is where all its ugliness came from. Its skull was flat in a lot of places and dipped inwards. This was a feature almost never seen in other mammals. It also had really thick bones in its skull, which left little space for a brain to grow. Along with being horribly ugly, the poor creature had a tiny brain. It just couldn't catch a break. Obviously, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but scientists say its skull was really weird, giving its head an an unusual shape. Then there were all the things that were sticking out from its head. Males had 6 things sticking out from their skulls. These were like tiny horns, but not at all actually horns. Modern giraffes have these 2 things on their heads too. They are bony structures covered over with skin, as opposed to horns that are made of keratin, the same stuff that makes up your fingernails. So what do you think? Was this creature ugly? Let me know in the comments below. The Concha-venator. In 2010, there was an entirely new dinosaur that everyone was talking about. It hasn't been in the news lately, so let me do my part by introducing those who haven't heard of it to Concha-venator. It was a humpbacked carnivore like a miniature T-Rex bred with a camel. It also had teeth like a shark. The initial article over 10 years ago was published in the scientific journal Nature. Researchers claim the dinosaur lived during the early Cretaceous, meaning 130 million years before today. From the tip of its dinosaur nose to the end of its tail, the creature was about 13 feet long. Its name, Concha-venator, translates into English as the hunchback hunter from Cuenca. It was named for its unusual hump and for the fact that its fossils were discovered in central Spain. Scientists still don't know what its hump was for. They think maybe it was something to attract the ladies, a little flash of flamboyance to earn a mate, or it may have been used to store energy or keep the dinosaur cool in hot weather. Scientist Ed Yong said sometimes dinosaur body parts are so strange, their purpose remains a mystery. Weird bats. 2023 was a big year for bat lovers. Paleontologists uncovered bat skeletons from 52 million years ago. They are the oldest bat skeletons ever found. Scientists have always wondered how bats developed the ability to echolocate. It is arguably the most remarkable trait in the animal kingdom. There are definitely a lot of different traits that could be considered the greatest. Some creatures can regenerate lost limbs. Some creatures can fly. Others can see in the dark. But the ability to echolocate is something truly spectacular. The issue is that most bat fossils that have been found are from creatures that had already developed the ability. Scientists don't know how it happened. There are no useful transitional skeletons, no missing links. The 2 newly discovered bat skeletons were found at the bottom of what was once a lake bed in Wyoming. Each one only weighed about as much as 5 tiny marbles. They were already able to fly and likely could use echolocation. Tim Reitbergen, an evolutionary biologist from the Netherlands, said the bat likely lived in the trees around the lake and hunted insects. These new bats looked almost identical to modern bats. It's almost as if they didn't evolve at all over the past 52 million years. But there are a few subtleties. These bats had slightly thicker bones, suggesting they were evolving away from creatures that got around by climbing trees instead of flying. There is also a different species of ancient bat found in Wyoming years ago that had short wings. This other bat probably got around by climbing and fluttering instead of flying. It also probably hadn't figured out how to echolocate yet. The whole bat conundrum is endlessly infuriating to scientists. For example, there are modern creatures known as flying foxes that are fruit-eating bats and do not have the ability to echolocate, yet they are still bats. Scientists don't know what gave some bats the ability for echolocation while others missed out. They don't know where the feature came from, nor do they know how bats became so successful. You might not know it, but bats are some of the most important animals in the world. There are over 1,400 species. 1/5 of all mammal species are bats. They live on every continent except Antarctica. The fluffy dinosaur. 125 million years ago, there was a predatory monster that stalked the wilds of China. The predatory monster was covered in fuzz. Researchers don't think it was hairy, nor was it feathery. It was a fuzzy dinosaur, maybe even fluffy. Its name was Sinocalliopteryx, and it was roughly 8 feet long. It was a fantastically powerful predator with sharp teeth that looked fairly similar to the velociraptors from the original Jurassic Park movie, only instead of having scaly lizard skin, they were covered in dino fuzz. It also had close relatives who were equally as fuzzy, like Sinosauropteryx. Being furry and maybe cute didn't mean being a weakling. A fossilized skeleton of Sinocalliopteryx was recently discovered in China with the leg bone of a dromosaurid in its preserved stomach. Dromaeosaurids were dinosaurs that had claws like sickles and have always been considered mega predators. The fact one of them wound up in the guts of a fuzzy dinosaur proves just how ferocious and formidable this dinosaur was. Cloning a mammoth. Harvard University genetics professor George Church is one of the leading minds in genome sequencing and gene splicing. Dr. Church is hoping that within the next few years, he will be able to clone mammoth DNA so that the extinct woolly mammoth can walk across the Arctic tundra once more. The company he is working with, Colossal, says they are currently working toward bringing back species that went extinct, primarily the woolly mammoth. Colossal believes they can create a hybrid using gene editing tools to splice together DNA from frozen mammoth remains found in the Siberian tundra with DNA from an Asian elephant. The Asian elephant is the closest living relative to the mammoth, and the resulting offspring created would be known as the mammothant. It would be physically born using the Asian elephant as a surrogate, but would look and act primarily like a woolly mammoth. The woolly mammoth is one of the most recent prehistoric beasts to have gone extinct. Some researchers say that small populations lived in Siberia up until roughly 1700 BC. The largest of these creatures grew to over 10 feet at the shoulder and weighed upwards of 15 tons. What's also interesting about mammoths is that they maintained the permafrost. Part of their behavior was scraping away layers of snow so that cold air filtered into the soil. They were a key part of the ecosystem but went extinct, quite likely due to intense hunting by early humans. Lost viruses. Scientists in Siberia recently uncovered an ancient virus hiding underneath the permafrost. The virus was identified as Mollivirus sibericum, and it belongs to a group called giant viruses. As scary as that sounds, the world is not currently at risk of being devastated by yet another pandemic, at least not this one. Since 2003, researchers have found at least 4 major giant viruses frozen in the permafrost. Some believe the extraction of these viruses could bring about global trouble, but nothing all that dangerous has been discovered as of yet. If anything, scientists are using these viruses to learn more about the role climate change plays on sickness and disease. The mollivirus is estimated to be around 30,000 years old. It's classified as a giant because unlike most viruses that you need an electron microscope to see, the mollivirus is visible using a perfectly ordinary microscope that you might find in any high school science class. Giant viruses also contain far more genes, upwards of 500 genes, while things like the human immunodeficiency viruses only carry 9. While not immediately a threat, other viruses like this could pose a problem. Researcher Jean-Michel Claverie says that even with the virus frozen in the ice, there could be a few viral particles that are still infectious. And if these infectious particles come into contact with a vulnerable host, the pathogenic virus could spread. It's just a good thing scientists haven't found anything immediately deadly, and we shouldn't worry about catching an ancient virus anytime soon. Exploding holes. In Siberia, the ground sometimes spontaneously blows up. Massive gas explosions have been erupting underneath the icy soil of Siberia seemingly unprovoked. It's a very recent phenomenon, and one scientists say is linked to climate change. Craters can now be found all across the Siberian landscape, like pockmarks across the snowy wasteland. The international community first took notice of these strange explosions in 2014 and have been trying to understand them ever since. Evgeny Chuvalin from the Skoltek Center for Hydrocarbon Recovery in Moscow says it's a pure stroke of luck that no fatalities have been caused by the explosions. Many of the craters were found not more than a few miles from commercial areas, where someone could have been standing right in the blast zone. But what's causing the ground to explode? That's the big question, and scientists believe they know the answer. Due to global warming, the surface permafrost is becoming weakened by the thawing process. With this layer of ice gone, there is nothing to keep pressure on the pools of methane gas that have formed deep under the ground. Then, the methane gas can't be held back, and it explodes out of the surface. It's like screwing the plastic cap off a carbonized drink very slowly until suddenly it's too weak to hold back the pressure. Since this is due to climate change, there is no end in sight for the random explosions. They will continue to happen throughout Siberia, wherever the permafrost becomes too weak and too thin. The Scythian warrior. In 2003, the brutalized remains of an ancient Scythian warrior were found in Siberia at the archaeological site of Arzan II. The warrior, along with about 40 others, was buried inside of a massive grave mound. But out of all the skeletal remains found, this man in particular had a very rough time at the end of his life. Researchers meticulously inspected his skeleton. They discovered that in his youth, he had survived a sword blow to the back of his skull. Then, as an adult, he took a triple-barbed arrowhead straight to the eye. It shattered the bone under his right eye and lodged into his head. According to Michael Schultz from the University of Göttingen, he was most certainly begging for death. But death did not come as swiftly as the man may have wished. 2,600 years ago, on the cold Siberian steppes, the warrior's comrades tried to help him. Researchers found thin cuts on the bone from where his friends had sliced away his cheek meat in order to try and get the arrow out of his head. They then attempted to use a saw to cut off pieces of bone, still trying to get the arrow dislodged. Finally, a surgeon cracked the bone with a chisel to try to free the arrowhead. But instead, the man died. It was utter torture, but just another day in prehistoric Russia. Teenage woolly rhino. The remains of a teenage woolly rhino were found in 2020 in the Yakutia region of Siberia, not far from the remote Terek River. This ancient specimen was so well preserved that its brain was still fully intact. Scientists determined it was likely only between 3 and 5 years of age when it passed away. Surprisingly, the adolescent rhino was not at all like the rhinos we see today. In fact, instead of the rough gray skin of African rhinos, it had a thick layer of hair covering its body. It had an extraordinary coat of hazel-colored fur, one thick horn, and great big chompers that it used to crush up its food. The woolly rhinoceros was dated to have lived about 20,000 years ago. It was found to be extremely healthy at its time of death, so well fed that it even had a hump of fat on it. Researchers believe it could have died after it was chased by predators into the water, where sadly it drowned. The dancing figurine. Not far from the city of Novosibirsk, a construction crew made a shocking discovery while working on a bridge project along the banks of the Ob River. Completely by accident, the team uncovered a small figurine that left them utterly perplexed. The figurine was carved into the likeness of a human caught in the middle of a dance, or perhaps some type of spiritual movement. It was made of pure bronze, a kind of dancing figurine dating back to at least 2,100 years ago. Professor Andrei Borodovsky is an archaeologist with the Russian Academy of Sciences, and he was interviewed about the mysterious figurine by the Siberian Times. He stated that the statue is of an Indian religious dancer, and that it doesn't have anything to do with Siberia or the ancient people who once lived there. It's a major mystery because Novosibirsk and India are separated by roughly 3,000 miles of mountainous terrain. For such a statue to make it so far would have been a journey like no other. The professor labeled the discovery as one of the most significant in the history of Siberian archaeology. He believes the only way the figurine made it from India to Siberia was through trade. It would have been traded multiple times, like a dollar bill that ends up circumnavigating the globe. Someone in India most likely traded it to someone on the Silk Road, and the trading continued until it finally made its way to the Ob River. Because it was found at the exact point where the river is at its narrowest, researchers believe whoever had this thing on them was trying to cross. They must have lost it during the crossing, and it got stuck in the sediment for over 2,000 years. The oldest permafrost. An international team in Siberia, somewhat accidentally, came across the oldest permafrost in the entire region. They were determining the age of a permafrost layer when they identified the soil at its deepest point to be 650,000 years old. What this means is that the deepest layer of ice in Siberia has been there for over 500,000 years. It's located at the eastern side of the village of Batagai, approximately 164 feet beneath the surface. It's an incredible discovery for one primary reason. According to Dr. Thomas Opel from the Alfred Wegener Institute in Potsdam, the ancient permafrost shows that even during warm weather, it doesn't necessarily melt. This is a big surprise, and something scientists hadn't even really considered. 130,000 years ago, there was a warm spell when the Arctic was around 41 degrees Fahrenheit warmer than it is today. Yet, despite being so much warmer, the permafrost didn't melt. It stayed put, and when the temperature dropped, more and more layers of ice formed to create the wilderness of Siberia we know today. Lion cubs. A pair of cave lion cubs have recently been found in Russia. The first to be discovered was a male lion cub named Boris, who was unveiled in 2017. A mammoth tusk collector was looking for ancient ivory along a river in Siberia when he came across the body of the lion. He was estimated to be about 43,448 years old. The year after, a female cub was found less than 50 feet away from the male cub. Researchers named her Sparta, and they say she died 27,962 years ago. That means over 16,000 years separated the lion cubs. Yet they died at the same place and were buried about 30 feet deep in the ice. Both of them were only a couple of months old when they became mummified. Cave lions lived across Europe and Asia up until about 10,000 years ago. They were very similar to modern lions, but more adapted to the frigid climate of the north. They were also about 20% bigger than modern lions. Males didn't have manes, and they were far more terrifying than any predator alive today. Even though they are related to modern African lions, the cave lions would have made them look like baby house cats. Professor Love Dalen with Stockholm University says the female cub Sparta is the best preserved specimen from the Ice Age ever dug out of the frozen soil. She is so remarkably preserved that the color of her fur is still the same as when she was alive. She has no connection to the other cub, and researchers aren't entirely sure why they were found in the same spot. It could have been a landslide that buried their dens, 16,000 years apart. One very old bird. A frozen bird from the Ice Age was recently found in Siberia. On the outside, the specimen is pretty grotesque. Its wings are black and brown, and its insides appear to have spilled out. Its legs are also quite frail, and they almost look like tiny twigs. At first glance, it appears to be like any bird that may have fallen out of a tree and gotten stuck in the mud. However, this is dead wrong. This bird is surprisingly believed to be around 46,000 years old. Genetic analysis identified it as a horned lark, a bird that would have lived at the same time as some of the most fantastic beasts since the dinosaurs. It would have flapped its wings around woolly mammoths, maybe woolly rhinoceroses, and possibly even saber-toothed cats and cave bears. The bird was found frozen in the permafrost near the northeastern Siberian village of Belaya Gora. It was uncovered by fossil hunters, a group who searches through the ice and snow for prehistoric ivory and anything they might be able to sell to scientists. The bird specimen seemed pretty important, so they passed it on to researchers at the Swedish Museum of Natural History. After further analysis, researchers at the museum now understand more about this mysterious ancient bird. It was almost definitely the ancestor of two subspecies of larks still living today, one in Russia and the other in Mongolia. This is pretty amazing because it is direct evidence of climatic changes at the end of the Ice Age, leading to the formation of new subspecies. The birds were dying out, and evolution took over and propelled them into the future by subtly altering their DNA to better suit their new environment. Snow goggles. The oldest eyewear that has ever been found was used by the old Bering Sea culture, a group of people who lived on both sides of the Bering Strait. Some of these folks lived on the Russian side, while others had a camp on the North American side. They were almost certainly related, and both of them most likely came from Russia back when the Bering Strait was the Bering Land Bridge. But with the rise of the sea level, North America was cut off from the rest of the world. The peak of the old Bering Sea culture was likely in the 3rd century AD, although some say they may have survived all the way until 1300. At a graveyard in Ekven, dating back to the 1st century, researchers discovered a pair of extraordinarily old snow goggles made from pure bone. These were used by the people living in the farthest east of Siberia to keep from going blind while traversing the bright white landscape. Another interesting thing is that many of these snow goggles found were different from one another. Some were elaborately decorated, some were not. They were all the same basic design, but done slightly different to show off one's artistic uniqueness. The tradition of building snow goggles remained on both sides of the Bering Strait and was passed along to the Inuit, the Yupik, and the Chukchi. They made their goggles from whale bones and mammoth ivory. They also painted them black to receive even more protection from the brutal Arctic sun. Number 10. The bear dog. An ancient jawbone belonging to a monstrous creature from prehistoric days was recently discovered in France. This creature has been described as a bear dog, and scientists have named it after a child-murdering cyclops. The bear dog lived all throughout the world 7.5 million years ago. It lived in North America, Europe, Asia, even Africa. It was a powerful predator, a carnivore with jaws that could tear and rip flesh, peeling meat right off the bone. The newest discovered specimen was found in the Pyrenees mountain range of Europe, and it belongs to an entirely new species. Bear dogs all belong to the family Amphicyonidae, of which all are extinct. And although they are called bear dogs, they don't belong to the bear or dog family. But they did possess features which are similar to both. For example, they had heavy bear-like bodies. They walked flat-footed like bears, but they had muscly legs and long snouts like dogs. This newest species has been named Tartarocyon, which comes from the one-eyed giants Tartaro, who ate children in Basque mythology. The giant supposedly lived in France in the 8th century BC, which is fitting since that's where the fossil was found. The most spectacular part of the fossil is definitely its teeth. According to paleontologists at the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Science, its teeth were so strong and sharp that it could have crushed bones into dust as it consumed entire animals. The creature weighed upwards of 700 pounds and lived from between 23 million and 5.3 million years ago. Number 9. Matsoidae. Matsoidae isn't a single snake, but a family of extinct Gondwanan snakes spanning the fossil record from the Upper Cretaceous to the Late Pleistocene eras. The snakes in this family are the most primitive that ever lived, including extinct boas, pythons, and the legendary Gigantophis. Maybe you've heard about the Titanoboa, allegedly the biggest snake that ever lived, at a whopping 42 to 50 feet long. We don't know exactly how big this thing grew, but modest estimates have placed it at about 33 feet. That would make it slightly smaller than the Titanoboa, unless, of course, scientists are wrong. It did live millions of years before the Titanoboa, and it's difficult to properly gauge size based on a small sampling of bones. For example, only around 30 Titanoboa skeletons have been found, and scientists still can't figure out how many vertebrae they even had, although they do estimate about 250. That's the issue with these things. Scientists can only really make educated guesses. At the end of the day, if the Gigantophis wasn't bigger than the Titanoboa, it was definitely a close call. The Titanoboa lived between 60 and 58 million years ago, while the Gigantophis lived as recently as 40 million years ago. Number 8. Megalania prisca. According to the Australian Museum, the Megalania prisca is the largest terrestrial lizard that ever lived. It was a gigantic monitor lizard that would make the Komodo dragon look like a tiny baby. It was first described back in 1859 by Sir Richard Owen, who determined it lived throughout the forests and grasslands of Australia. It would have been an exceptionally fierce predator, and just like its distant cousin, the Komodo dragon from Indonesia, just about everything within range was up for eating. The gigantic lizard would have feasted on mammals, giant snakes, and even other reptiles if it felt like it. It could grow to be over 15 feet long, making it roughly the size of a freakishly large alligator. What makes it even more terrifying was the possibility that it may have been able to climb trees. Actually, some scientists believe the Megalania might have been an ambush predator. That means that if it were alive today, moving through the Australian wilderness would be like playing Russian roulette. The gigantic lizard could have hid itself in the underbrush, then lashed out with toxic saliva and razor-sharp teeth. With just one bite, its venom would have been fatal. We don't actually know if it was venomous or not, but scientists think it was. Number 7. Floppy-eared dog monster. A totally new creature was recently discovered in the Burgess Shale in Canada, and it doesn't look like anything scientists have found before. It's been described as a floppy-eared hound, and yet it was a marine creature that looked like a bizarre mutant shrimp with half the body of a centipede. There's really no easy way to describe it, as it would have looked like something that came from a faraway galaxy, like an alien creature that swam through space. It's called Balhuticaris voltae, and it's a gigantic bivalved arthropod. That means it's very distantly related to the crustaceans of today. It's kind of like the great-great-grandparent of crabs and shrimps. Its carapace is particularly unique in that it actually grows over its head and drapes down past its body like a pair of huge floppy ears, similar to a basset hound. The creature lived 500 million years ago during the Cambrian explosion. The explosion started about 541 million years ago and lasted until 485 million years ago. It was one of the most diverse times in Earth's history. This was a time when the ocean was blooming with unfathomable life forms, strange and indescribable monsters of every shape and form. These creatures are well represented in the Burgess Shale, which is a huge deposit of fossils from that same period. Scientists believe there was a great mudslide which trapped thousands upon thousands of creatures in muck to be preserved. This is a fascinating hypothesis because it would mean that most of the fossils we found from the Cambrian explosion came from just one spot. It would mean we have barely 1% documented of all the crazy animals that existed at the dawn of complex life. Number 6. Andrewsarchus. In the spring of 1923, a group of museum researchers traveled to Inner Mongolia to hunt for jewels. But instead of finding treasure in the form of minerals, they discovered a rich treasure trove of fossils. One of the young paleontologists in the group, Can Chuen Pao, came across the gigantic skull of a monstrous beast. It was unlike anything they'd seen before, at least 3 feet long and complete with large teeth. One of the researchers immediately decided the animal was a carnivore, but others in the camp disagreed. This led to an argument, as some believed the skull belonged to an extinct giant pig. They took the skull back to the museum and named it Andrewsarchus mongoliensis, in honor of the expedition leader, Roy Chapman Andrews. To this day, the skull found in 1923 is the only specimen of the species. Everything we know about this dinosaur comes from this one sample. And yet scientists have been able to figure out that the dinosaur lived 45 million years ago, that it was about 6 feet high at the shoulders and 12 feet long in total. If true, that would make the Andrewsarchus the largest meat-eating mammal known to science. It would have looked like a mix between a pig and a hippo, and was perhaps even distantly related to whales. And now for number 5. But first, want to give a big shout out to Godesi and Joseph Neff. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, welcome, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, because why not? Number 5. The wondrous crowned crocodile. 255 million years ago in Russia, there was a very strange omnivorous monstrosity called Estemenosuchus mirabilis. This translates to wondrous crowned crocodile. It was named this because of a pair of bony knobs projecting from each side of its cranium. It gave the animal the appearance of wearing a crown of bones. It was like antlers, but not nearly as long or pointy. Now don't let the name confuse you because this thing wasn't a crocodile. In fact, it wasn't anything close to a crocodile. If anything, the creature was more like a prehistoric hippopotamus. It walked on 4 legs slightly above the ground, could live on land, but also enjoyed being in the water, and it could kill and eat live animals or just munch on plants to survive. It could grow to be roughly 10 feet long, but the largest part of the animal was its head, 1/5 of its entire body at over 2 feet in length. Number 4. The bulldog abelosaurid. A team of researchers from both Egypt and America recently discovered an entirely new kind of dinosaur in the Sahara Desert of Egypt. The dinosaur belongs to the family of abelosaurid, a group of ancient theropods. Theropods are defined by hollow bones and 3-toed limbs, kind of like chickens, and were the apex predators of the Cretaceous era around 98 million years ago. This particular dinosaur was about 20 feet long, ate nothing but meat, and had a strange, ugly face. Its face was kind of smashed in, similar to a bulldog, but it walked around on its hind legs, and it had small teeth along with short, flailing arms. This was a remarkable discovery for 2 main reasons. First of all, the fact that the scientists found a new species is always very exciting. Second, because no other abelosaurid dinosaur has ever been found in northern Africa. These dinosaurs have only been found in Europe and in the southern hemisphere. It was dug up back in 2016 during an expedition. but it took 6 years of investigating the bones to verify it as a new species. It's now one of the ugliest, or rather weirdest-looking carnivores from the Cretaceous era. The dinosaur lived in a part of the world that would have been entirely terrifying. According to Hisham Salam from the American University in Cairo, it lived in a densely populated area of carnivores. The Sahara Desert was home to one of the highest concentrations of predators in the prehistoric world, and scientists are still trying to work out how they all live together in such a small place without killing each other. Number 3. Armored herbivores. Canadian paleontologists recently analyzed the fossilized stomach contents from a remarkably preserved nodosaur. The nodosaur was a peculiar type of ankylosaur, one that lived 110 million years ago during the Cretaceous. It lived in what is now Alberta and the Canadian prairies. It was essentially an armored tank and was covered in bony osteoderms. These are quite similar to the structures which make up turtle shells. You might say that ankylosaurs were just humongous turtles with clubs for tails. In a way, you'd be right. They first appeared in the Middle Jurassic and lived until around the time of the asteroid impact that killed off the dinosaurs. This particular specimen was found totally by accident in March of 2011 by an excavator at the Suncor Millennium Mine. The accidental discovery turned out to be the find of a lifetime. The dinosaur was preserved beyond anyone's wildest imagination. It still had much of its soft tissue, including its scales and the keratin-like material covering its bony armor. Plus, it still had stuff in its stomach. Researchers from the local university were able to look at what the nodosaur had for its last meal. What they found is that the dinosaur really liked eating leaves. 88% of its diet was leaf material, with the rest being mostly stems and wood and charcoal. 85% of the leaves it ate were ferns. This great big tank of a monster had just eaten a belly full of ferns before something killed it. Then, somehow, its body got trapped in the muck in such a way that it hardly decomposed. Number 2. The giant short-faced kangaroo. The Procoptodon goliath is an extinct type of kangaroo from the Pleistocene period, and while it may have had a body similar to the kangaroos we know today, it was quite different. The main difference was that it had a short face. Its face was kind of flat like a pug, and it didn't have a long snout like normal kangaroos today. This was an absolute beast of a creature. It was the most heavily built kangaroo that scientists have ever found, short and stocky with a single large toe on each foot and clawed fingers for scraping branches. It was almost like a Neanderthal mixed with a kangaroo. It's not clear why the Procoptodon goliath died out while modern kangaroos survived. It lived in the same habitats, in the windswept sand dunes and treeless wastelands of New South Wales, but it just didn't make the cut. It went extinct along with every other subspecies of short-faced kangaroo. Number 1. Brigmophyseter. The Brigmophyseter was a kind of prehistoric whale with teeth. You may have heard that whales used to have 4 legs, and that's true. Whales did at one point walk on land, and it took quite some time for them to actually shed their legs once they moved into the water. But what a lot of people don't realize is that they also had jaws full of teeth that they could use to rip apart fish and squid and even other whales. Although little is known about the behavior of Brigmophyseter, scientists have made some educated guesses. The creature may have used echolocation to track down prey, but there's no actual evidence. Some scientists have also suggested it swam in pods like modern whales, but that's also nothing but speculation. One thing scientists also speculate is that the Brigmophyseter was one of the main things on the menu for the prehistoric megalodon. Both were swimming in the ocean at the same time during the Miocene and in the same waters. Considering the megalodon was the biggest and most ferocious shark that ever lived, it wouldn't be hard for it to hunt prehistoric whales, even if those whales did have teeth. In fact, most scientists agree the megalodon was a whale hunting expert. Could the dodo make a comeback? In 2022, the genome of the dodo bird was sequenced from a small DNA sample. Now, in 2024, a biotech company is working with conservationists to get a habitat ready. The dodo bird is about to be reborn. It's wild, but it's true. Humanity is on the cusp of bringing back animals from the dead. They're not as zombies, hopefully. The process to de-extinct the dodo is already underway. The plan was announced in January 2023 by scientists at Colossal Biosciences in the United States. Now, they've partnered with the Mauritian Wildlife Foundation to restore the bird's original habitat. It's like the biotech company is shopping at the pet store for all the supplies they'll need when their baby dodo bird shows up. But just what happened to the dodo anyway? To be honest, it's not a very happy story. You already know that it ends in extinction. What I can say is that before the 16th century, the dodo bird lived in paradise. Imagine you're on a deserted island. There is nothing predatory to eat you, and the weather is always perfect. All of your best friends are around, and there is an endless buffet of your favorite food. Nobody is raiding your nest for eggs or trying to steal your feathers. It is the very definition of dodo paradise. This was the world the dodo bird enjoyed prior to European settlers arriving on Mauritius in the 16th century. Sailors started hunting the dodo bird for food. They stole eggs from its nest to eat. Within 100 years, European settlers had destroyed the dodo bird's natural habitat. In real time, they hunted the dodo until there wasn't a single one left. Paradise was lost. The dodo bird became the face of humans causing animals to go extinct. But what if paradise could come back? Researchers at Colossal Biosciences are working in the lab and on the ground to get everything ready for the arrival of the dodo bird. Mauritius has changed over the last 4 centuries. A safe space must be created that will bolster the dodo's survival. The dodo is planned to be released in several controlled areas that are without predators. Certain plants will need to be grown for the dodos to eat. It will be a full habitat restoration with disease control and supplementary feeding. If it all works out, which I hope it does, in the next few years, you and I could see real dodo birds. T-Rex by 2050. The dodo bird has been extinct for less than 400 years. Dinosaurs have been gone for at least 66 million. Yet if scientists get their way, dodo birds could become T-Rex food by 2050. That's only another 26 years from now. The work is already being done, as is proof by the chicken that was recently transformed into a partial dino. Yes, it is already happening. Scientists genetically tweaked chicken embryos so that the embryos grew snouts instead of beaks. Dinosaur snouts, to be specific. It was some serious Dr. Frankenstein-level biological manipulation, but wow, is it cool to see. You may have heard the anecdote before that chickens are the closest living relatives to tyrannosaurs. It's true in a roundabout kind of way. Scientists are not entirely sure how it happened, only that it did. Bird evolution, the twin bones in the snout of dinosaurs started growing longer and fused together to create a beak. Paleontologist Bart Anjan-Bular at the University of Chicago said the transition from snout to beak was one of the most radical changes. Otherwise, avians are still hugely similar to their dinosaur relatives. To create a Tyrannosaurus rex, scientists simply need to undo evolution. This starts with something simple like breeding chickens that have snouts instead of beaks. Then it's a matter of continuing to reverse smaller and smaller changes. All of this until a mutated chicken lays an egg, and from that egg comes a tiny dinosaur. The tiny part is what a lot of people don't realize about bringing T-Rexes back from extinction. They won't be the size of Godzilla, much to everyone's disappointment and relief. If scientists can work around the ethical roadblocks currently hampering their research, the first reborn dinosaurs will be fairly small. The first dinosaur will be a biological T-Rex, only the size standard chicken. Are you guys ready for that? Mammoth regeneration. Ben Lamb has become the new tech genius everyone is talking about. He could be the next big name like Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, but only if he comes through on his promise of creating the first woolly mammoth by the year 2028. Ben is the CEO of Colossal Biosciences. Born in Texas, Ben has described himself as a serial entrepreneur. He has founded 4 major technology startups, but now all of his attention is focused on bringing back extinct beasts. He's not just talking about it though, he's doing it. Ben has investors like Paris Hilton and Thomas Tull. Thomas was the creator of the Jurassic Park franchise, someone who would obviously be interested in de-extinction. Ben has already raised tens of millions of dollars, and the project is well underway. He and his team are very confident that in the next 4 years, mammoths will once again roam the earth. Where do you think would be the best place to reintroduce mammoths into the wild? Take a guess. Go ahead and write it in the comments. Or where would you want to see them? The company has decided to go with Texas. Texas is where the company's labs are, so it's where the first mammoth in over 4,000 years will theoretically be born. Inside their lab, the work is already underway to create artificial wombs in which to grow woolly mammoth babies. But how do they do it? It's surprisingly simple. The woolly mammoth is 99.6% similar to the living Asian elephant. Chief Animal Officer Matt James said all they need to do is re-engineer the genome of the Asian elephant to reflect that of the extinct mammoth. Matt James is incredibly excited about the possibilities. In a recent interview, he talked about being the first person to take a selfie with a mammoth. Just think of the absurdity of such an amazing event. A person taking a selfie with a creature from the Ice Age. It could be you in only a few years if Ben, Matt, and the rest of the team pull off the impossible. The grasshopper. Sometimes creatures come back from extinction all on their own, but then I suppose they weren't extinct in the first place, were they? For the first time in 85 years, a spectacular species of grasshopper was spotted in Southeast Asia. Scientists in Myanmar and Thailand thought it was gone forever. The first photographs were taken totally by accident. One photo was taken by someone on a family trip who spotted the grasshopper eating a citrus plant. The other photographer was studying sesame plants in Yan'an, Guang, when they saw a pair of the bugs mating. Both pictures were posted to a Facebook group, but nobody could identify the peculiar grasshopper. And for good reason. The fascinating little grasshopper has been missing for so long that the last time somebody saw it was World War II. Naturally, there were no photos of the insect until now. Without photos, nobody was able to identify the strange bug. Nobody except insect expert Joseph Scalio. Joseph stumbled upon the photographs and was shocked. It might not seem like a big deal to the average person, but for a bug expert, someone who has dedicated their life to things that creep and crawl, it was a profound discovery. Joseph identified the bug as belonging to a family of critters known as gaudy grasshoppers because they are so colorful. The first gaudy grasshopper was discovered in August of 1937. A male and female specimen were preserved and transferred to the Academy of Natural Sciences of Philadelphia. Then, in 1964, the grasshopper was declared the only member of its genus, but then it was never seen again. Only those two specimens were captured in 1937, and now the two photographs taken randomly in late 2022. It was assumed the grasshopper had gone extinct, but clearly he was just hiding. And now for number 10. But first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Moon Shadow and Rebs and Blue for supporting this channel. I hope you have a wonderful day, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. The Tasmanian tiger. Do you remember a few years ago when Elon Musk told everybody that humans would be living on Mars by 2025? Well, it's clearly not happening, as I'm sure you know. Elon Musk also claimed 1 million people will live on Mars by 2050, which seems unlikely, but what do you think? The reason I want to mention Elon Musk and his predictions is that Colossal Biosciences has been biting off a lot lately. They've already promised to bring back the dodo bird, the woolly mammoth, and now the Tasmanian tiger. Can they really do it? The Tasmanian tiger has been extinct for 100 years. Out of all the other creatures that Ben Lamb and his company are trying to bring back from the grave, Tasmanian tigers are the freshest. Scientists were able to easily extract DNA and RNA from the desiccated skin and muscle tissue of a preserved corpse at the museum in Sweden. This was a lot easier than harvesting woolly mammoths frozen in permafrost. It was the difference between pulling fresh carrots out of the ground and buying them already cooked from the grocery store. The Tasmanian tiger is also known as the thylacine. Take a look at the images of the extinct animal and tell me it isn't the most amazing marsupial/dog/cat creature thing that you've ever seen. Sadly, it disappeared 2,000 years ago from its homeland in Australia, where it lived with all the other wacky animals. The thylacine survived only on the isolated island of Tasmania. It was the only marsupial apex predator on the planet. It played a crucial role in maintaining the natural order of Tasmania. When humans showed up, they noticed the peculiar animal and hunted it into extinction. The biggest issue for humans was that the coyote-sized marsupial allegedly feasted on their livestock. European settlers in the 1800s did not take kindly to anything that interfered with their goats and chickens and cows, so they made a concentrated effort to wipe them out. However, scientists don't think Tasmanian tigers were responsible. Tasmanian tigers were naturally shy, nocturnal beasts. The loss of European livestock likely had nothing to do with thylacines. Times were changing in the early 1900s, and people were becoming more aware of the dangers of extinction. Tasmanian tigers were given protected status, meaning it was illegal to hunt them. But it was too late. In 1936, the very last Tasmanian tiger died from exposure because it was kept in cruel and barbaric conditions at the Beaumaris Zoo in Hobart. I know it's super sad and depressing, but it's part of history. It's also something that has been happening since long before the European settlers ate all the dodo birds. Scientists believe Tasmanian tigers went extinct from Australia due to the arrival of the indigenous population. There is good news, though. I'm not going to leave you with doom and gloom. Andrew Pask from the University of Melbourne is hard at work trying to bring these amazing animals back from extinction. Andrew is the leader of the Thylacine Integrated Genetic Restoration Research Team, or TIGER. Andrew has already worked to resurrect a single Tasmanian tiger gene in the embryo of a mouse. This was back in 2005, marking the first time that anything like it had been done. Now Andrew is working closely with Ben Lamb from Colossal Biosciences. Together, there is real hope the Tasmanian tiger will live again. Colossal is currently working on a full-stage artificial womb to gestate and develop a live baby. The quagga. Currently galloping around on the plains of South Africa is a small population of animals most people have never heard of before. The animal is known as the quagga, sort of like a half zebra. The quagga has zebra stripes on the front half of its body, including its head, but the back half of its body is brown and furry. It's amazing that so few people have heard of this animal, considering it's the most impressive success story of bringing back an extinct species. Prior to a few years ago, nobody had seen a quagga since the 1800s. Scientists at Cape Town University successfully completed a breeding program that resurrected the zebra relatives. Story of the quagga is the same old song and dance, so I won't bog you down with the more morose details. Essentially, European settlers in South Africa in the 1800s caused the quagga to go extinct, with the last one being shot in 1883. To bring it back, scientists used living zebras. They went out into the wild and looked for zebras that most closely resemble quaggas. Amazingly, it worked. It took 5 generations and some very selective breeding. The team reduced the stripy patterns of the animals until only partially striped zebra/quagga hybrids remained. Scientists kept on breeding the creature until they were producing animals that were more quagga than zebra. It seems easy, and in a way, it was. This whole effort wasn't any more difficult than selectively breeding dogs to be a certain color. The only reason this was such a big success was that zebras and quaggas are so incredibly similar. It wasn't a huge stretch to backtrack the genes during the breeding program. Although I should mention that the living quaggas in South Africa right now are not 100% identical to their extinct friends. As explained by Professor Eric Harley, the creatures that have been bred are quagga-like animals. They might not have the same genetic adaptations as the extinct population. Still, the goal of the researchers is to create a large wild population of quaggas, totally separate from zebras, that will thrive for many years to come on the African plains. Australian dragons. Biotech firm Colossal Biosciences has their nose in the business of just about every extinct creature at this point in 2024. It's not a bad thing, especially since their work is so promising. The company isn't only trying to bring things back from extinction, they are also helping to prevent some animals from going the way of the dodo. The Texas-based firm is involved in a project right now to restore the Victorian grassland earless dragon. It was feared extinct until a specimen was found this year, much to the delight of conservationists. When the company heard about the discovery, They committed a massive amount of money to save the dragon. It isn't quite extinct, but it is considered critically endangered. The Victorian grassland earless dragon hadn't been seen since 1969. Scientists in Australia assumed it was as good as gone. It was only spotted by a sightseer who happened upon it totally by chance. Now the Melbourne Zoo is helping to build a quarantine breeding center to help boost the species' numbers. It's partnered with Colossal Biosciences as a part of their Lost Species initiative. The dragon isn't particularly big, it's not going to breathe fire, and it definitely isn't going to eat any brave knights. It's only a few inches long, pushed to extinction by foxes and feral cats. It wasn't necessarily humans this time, at least not on purpose. Though I admit that humans were the ones who introduced the foxes and cats to Australia in the first place. Neanderthal antibiotics. All of this talk about bringing back large animals, and I haven't even mentioned the attempt to de-extinct certain antibiotics. It's an effort that could save lives, but doesn't appear much in the media because, to be truthful, antibiotics just aren't as exciting as woolly mammoths. Scientists at the University of Pennsylvania are working hard to bring back tiny molecules with antibiotic properties from an unexpected source. The molecules come from extinct organisms, and by organisms, I mean our good friends the Neanderthals, who went extinct about 40,000 years ago. Scientists are calling it molecular de-extinction. But what's the point? And how do you even bring back something as small as a molecule from the void of extinction? The how involves artificial intelligence. Scientists at the university trained an AI model to discover which molecules could make effective antibiotics for modern humans. The algorithm identified extremely strong candidates from the DNA of Neanderthals. Next, it was really easy. Scientists went to their lab and created the molecules, then tested them on infected mice. Sure enough, the molecules fought off bacterial infections. These are molecules that were present in the bodies of Neanderthals, but no longer exist in the bodies of modern Homo sapiens. It's a lot easier to de-extinct one molecule than an entire body filled with billions of molecules. Now I'm going to scare you just a little bit. I know we're all still anxious after the disaster that was COVID, but according to the CDC, there is an even worse problem on the horizon. The Center for Disease Control has warned very recently that humanity is entering an era in which antibiotics are useless. We've created the disaster by overusing antibiotics. And viruses are smart. They mutate and change. Antibiotics are everywhere, used to treat humans, animals, and crops. Bacteria have been hard at work adapting to modern drugs, morphing into superbugs that are impervious to all available antibiotics. By the time you are finished watching this video, at least one person in the United States will have died from an infection that was previously treatable by antibiotics. Whoa, that is an intensely scary thought. Things that used to save lives are now no more effective than a placebo. A major UN report warned humanity that by 2050, 10 million people a year will die because antibiotics don't work anymore. Coming to the rescue is AI and, seriously, unexpectedly, dead cavemen. Molecular de-extinction could lead to a whole new generation of antibiotics that modern bacteria hasn't had a chance to adapt to yet. Millions of lives could be saved thanks to the blood of our ancient ancestors. The Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex has gone extinct twice already. In January of 2000, a falling tree ended the species in the most ridiculous way possible. Out of all the things that could have finally ended the Pyrenean ibex, it was a tree that toppled over. In 2003, it happened again. Only the extinction happened this time in a Spanish laboratory. The Pyrenean ibex had just been cloned. The newborn clone gasped for air, but there was something wrong. Tragically, the little clone didn't make it, and the Pyrenean ibex was extinct again, all after being resurrected for just a few seconds. The Pyrenean ibex just can't catch a break. The wild goat species was around for thousands of years before the invention of civilization. There are even pictures of them painted on European cave walls from 30,000 years ago. Although I should mention that there are a lot of different species of ibex. Wild mountain goats used to live across most of the world. There are cave paintings of them in Israel's Negev desert from 10,000 years ago, and in the south of France from 18,000 years ago. Scientists can't always tell which species is painted crudely by Stone Age fingers on cavern walls. The more reliable records of the Pyrenean ibex come from the Middle Ages. They were a popular creature to see in Spain, especially in the north. They grazed on the mountain slopes, leisurely munching grass and living very peacefully. But by 1910, only 40 of them were left. Their numbers plummeted significantly in the 1800s. By the time scientists realized they needed to save the Pyrenean ibex, it was too late. Cecilia was the last of her kind, crushed on January 6, 2000 by a falling tree. They were too late to save Cecilia, but they had a safety net in place. Shortly before her bizarre demise, scientists took skin biopsies from her ears. These were placed in cold storage. Then, after her death, the samples were thawed so that Cecilia could be cloned. Cloning is a tough gig. Scientists produced 500 cloned embryos, implanted 154 of them, and received one baby. Unfortunately, physical defects in the lungs caused the birth to fail. As of right now, the Pyrenean ibex is still extinct. Scientists don't think that cloning is the way to go because birth defects are too difficult to prevent. It's very sad because even with all the genetic tools, it's still proven too hard to bring back these goats. I don't know how colossal bioscience is going to bring back a mammoth. The Neanderthal. Scientists have already brought back molecules from Neanderthals to be used in the creation of new antibiotics. But what about the whole Neanderthal? Could scientists de-extinct an entire human species? Our Neanderthal brethren and sistren have been gone for roughly 30,000 years. Even though they are directly related to us, we still struggle to understand their history. It's known that humans existed alongside Neanderthals and bred with them. We shared food, fire, and our hearts. Neanderthals were creative, they made their own art, and they likely had similar cognitive and linguistic abilities as us. But then something awful happened. Humans began to outnumber Neanderthals. Soon enough, they were gone. Nobody knows if humans defeated them in a prehistoric war. Some scientists believe that humans and Neanderthals bred until only the human genome was left. What caused the Neanderthal extinction is one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in anthropology. So let's bring them back and ask them. The Neanderthal Genome Project was a collaboration with scientists from top US companies and institutions in Germany. In 2010, they presented a draft sequence of the Neanderthal genome. Since then, incredible discoveries have been made. Data has answered questions about Neanderthal language and also revealed precisely which genes they passed on to humans through interbreeding. Bringing one back is a much stranger story. There are about 10 million differences between the Neanderthal genome and the human genome. The 10 million differences would need to be changed, and then the altered stem cell implanted inside a human female. Then a human woman would need to give birth to a Neanderthal baby. Who wants to volunteer to do that? It's such an unusual scientific thought that it's most likely never going to happen. The ethical concerns make it an impossibility. Even if, and it's a big if, women were lining up outside of a genetic laboratory to be implanted with a Stone Age embryo, it wouldn't be morally accepted. But what would, if it theoretically happened, a Neanderthal do in the modern world? The baby wouldn't be from the Stone Age. It would be a modern baby with Neanderthal features and genetics. Could it study at school? Could the baby become the first Neanderthal doctor? What do you think about the ethics and morality of this? Let me know in the comments below. Oregonian dire wolves. A dog breeder in Oregon is trying to resurrect ancient dire wolves through selective breeding. Her name is Lois Schwartz, and she has been at it for the last 30 years. The results of her work are outstanding. She has managed to create an entirely new dog that she named the American Alsatian. The adorable dog isn't exactly a dire wolf. Still, it's the closest thing to a dire wolf that someone today can have as a trusted companion. Lois's goal was to create an enormous dog similar in size to the Ice Age wolf, but way less frightening and a lot cuddlier. You may have heard of dire wolves before in fantasy, and especially in Game of Thrones, but the giant beasts were once very real animals. Unlike dragons and White Walkers, dire wolves roamed the chilly landscape of North America 125,000 years ago. When the world was a giant ice cube, they lived as far south as South America. There may have even been primitive human ancestors who tamed these creatures. Scientists call them Canis dirus, with the last of their kind going extinct about 10,000 years ago. Fossils of dire wolves were discovered in Indiana in the 1850s, then more in the La Brea tar pits near downtown Los Angeles. Thanks to the large number of fossils, scientists have a very good idea of what dire wolves looked like. They were bigger than modern wolves, with larger heads, stronger jaws, and a longer body. Adult dire wolves could grow to over 6 feet long. Let's get back to Lois for a moment. In the 1980s, she was struck by an epiphany. Her new goal in life was to create a large dog that looks like a ferocious beast, but has the personality of a golden retriever. Thus began her work on the Dire Wolf Project. It isn't a terrible idea, and in fact, I kind of want one now. Who wouldn't want a prehistoric predator with the peaceful temperament of a lab? Though if I had the choice between a dire wolf and a chicken-sized T-Rex, I don't know, I think I'd be torn. Which one would you want? Lois started with an Alaskan Malamute. She added English Mastiffs for bulkier bones, Pyrenees dogs for more bulk, and Irish Wolfhounds for extra length and height. After 30 years, she is left with a shaggy gray dog that isn't quite a dire wolf, but is the next best thing. Lois has already sold over 3,000 puppies, with hundreds of people still on the waiting list. She and her daughter are the only breeders on the planet with these unique canines. York groundsel. In 1991, a yellow flower that only grew in York, England, went extinct. Yes, this is all about a flower. But trust me, it's interesting. Plants are often overlooked when it comes to bringing things back from the dead, but plants are awesome. Just imagine if scientists could figure out a way to bring back some of the crazy trees and plants that existed 300 million years ago. Forget Jurassic Park. Scientists could create a botanical garden of only primordial plants. I'm talking jacked up Venus flytraps that can eat elephants, assuming those existed. The York groundsel isn't quite as exciting, but it was an ordinary yellow flower that died out because people were using weed killer too much. Now, for the first time in history, an urban plant has been brought back from extinction. The history of this flower is a little bizarre. It was found growing in a parking lot at a railway station in 1979. It was the first species of flower found to have evolved in Britain over the previous 50 years. However, as part of an urban plan to tidy up, the flower was denounced as a weed. By 1991, the people of York had sprayed it out of existence. Andrew Shaw from the Rare British Plants Nursery was determined to give the flower a second shot. With help from the government's conservation group called Natural England, a recovery program was initiated. Plant specialists gathered preserved seeds, planted them, and boom! Thousands of plants were sown into protected plots across York and along the network rail land. After 32 years of extinction, the York groundsel bloomed, and the city was awash in beautiful yellow flowers. Dinosaur fossils. It's one thing to slowly mutate a chicken until it's a tiny T-Rex, but what about growing a biologically correct dinosaur from a fossilized embryo? It's a possibility that could be even more reliable than making tiny Rex chickens. In 2010, paleontologists discovered a small cluster of dinosaur embryos in China. It was a huge deal because for the first time, scientists could study a dinosaur while in its embryonic stage. Researchers were shocked to find that dinosaurs underwent almost an identical pattern of bone growth as modern birds. The eggs added additional proof that birds are uncannily similar to dinosaurs. But the discoveries weren't done rolling in yet. That same year, a nesting site was discovered with 200 bones from juvenile plant eaters and fragmented eggshells, plus more embryos in various stages of development. These long-necked dinosaurs died about 190 million years ago. Scientists were able to reconstruct their growth stage by stage because of the sheer number of remains. But what about bringing these things back from the dead? We want dinosaur pets and we want them now, right? Cloning dinosaur DNA, like in Jurassic Park, is still impossible. There also isn't any dinosaur DNA to speak of. Although incredible fossils have been found and lots of eggs since 2010, there isn't a piece of dino DNA anywhere. The most recent heart palpitation of excitement involved Chinese scientists scraping preserved nuclei from dinosaur femur cells. It was close, but they still didn't confirm DNA. Scientists have looked through fossilized cartilage, in embryos, and deep within bones. But without the physical DNA, there is no way that embryos can be cloned to create a biologically correct dinosaur. The auroch. The last auroch died in Poland in 1627. Today, a herd of modern aurochs can be found in the mountains of Spain. A group of extinct cattle was introduced to the wild using ancient genetics and domesticated cattle. At the end of the Ice Age, aurochs roamed Europe as giant cows. They weren't particularly woolly, nor were they vicious. They didn't have beaks or wings. They were just large cows that prehistoric people drew on cave walls. Though to be fair, their largeness should not be understated. They weighed over 2,500 pounds and had horns that floated 7 feet above the ground. The aurochs alive today are the largest herbivores in Europe. In 2013, the Dutch Taurus Foundation initiated a breeding program. Much like how the quagga was brought back to life by breeding zebras, the auroch was brought back using domestic cows. Ricardo Almazan, a local safari guide in Spain involved in the rewilding of the aurochs, said they are not 100% the same as the ancient ones. The living aurochs share about 90% of their ancestors' DNA. Over 600 of them have been bred since 2017. If you were a Stone Age person from 11,000 years ago, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. Given enough time, if the breeding program is successful, the new aurochs will eventually become a species just as distinct as the original ones.
Some creatures survived mass extinction. Around 252 million years ago, at the end of the Permian period, before the dinosaurs existed, a sudden rise in global temperatures triggered the largest ever mass extinction event in history. Known as the Permian-Triassic extinction event, or the Great Dying, it saw the eradication of 90% of the world's aquatic species. Meanwhile, 70% of the Earth's land animals were wiped out of existence. The area around the equator, known as the equatorial belt, became incredibly hot and arid. For a long time, scientists believed that any animals from this region who survived the Great Dying had no choice but to migrate elsewhere to avoid going extinct. But they recently proved themselves wrong with the discovery of some footprints belonging to a massive prehistoric reptile that lived in the Italian Alps. A team of researchers found a collection of 10 prints at an altitude of over 7,200 feet. They date back to around 250 million years ago, a time during which they thought the area had been rendered completely inhospitable. Measuring roughly a foot long, the footprints belonged to a crocodile-like reptile that would have been at least 13 feet long. The creature lived along the shoreline of an ancient river delta that no longer exists today. The fact that a massive reptile was in the area so soon after the Great Dying proves that some animals managed to survive in places that experts believed were unlivable. It wouldn't have been the only creature there either, according to paleontologist Massimo Bernardi, who said that it would have been impossible for the reptile to survive alone. There would have been an entire ecosystem that had managed to carry on in some form after the mass extinction wiped out nearly all of Earth's life forms. Scientists have referenced the Great Dying as a cautionary tale about the current trajectory that our rapidly warming planet is on. The climate is changing at its highest rate in tens of millions of years, and species are dying off in alarming numbers. Some researchers believe that we are headed straight toward disaster, and that if we don't change course soon, it'll be too late to avoid severe devastation. Giant ancient bull. Here's something you've probably never heard of before. In October of 1966, archaeologists with the Regional Museum of Ica in Peru uncovered an incredibly massive container that looked like a giant egg. Larger than a person, it turned out to be an enormous clay vessel meant to hold grains 2,400 years ago. The bowl measured about 6 feet wide in diameter and was just over 9 feet tall. Inside the giant vessel, archaeologists found a variety of seeds from beans, yucca, and guava. But here's where things get a little strange. Making a container that big thousands of years ago couldn't have been easy. It's not even easy now. The giant clay pot would have had to be made in a pretty advanced workshop. Archaeologists haven't found any such place in the general area. They believe the giant clay pot was transported from far away. But how and why? The clay pot was found in the Ica region of Peru, close to the Nazca lines and the Paracas skulls. But even with all of this information, scientists still don't know exactly which culture was responsible for making such a giant pot. For that matter, archaeologists aren't even sure why it was so enormous. Someone definitely used it to store food, but why did they need something so big? It's much more practical to store food in smaller containers that can be filled and moved more easily. The only theory researchers have is that the ancient Peruvians believed that by filling the giant clay vessel with enough food and burying it underground, it could preserve more food for longer. Remember, these people were much more knowledgeable in advance than we give them credit for. Headless Roman remains. Archaeologists investigating a trio of Roman cemeteries from nearly 2,000 years ago in England discovered something both shocking and disturbing. Their investigations revealed the decapitated bodies of 17 people. Experts called it an exceptionally high number of headless remains, leading them to make some pretty gruesome accusations. In total, the Cambridge Archaeological Unit discovered 52 burials while excavating a farm in the town of Somersham. 13 of them were buried face down, and 17 of them had no heads. The ones with no heads had their skulls placed at their feet. Some were even in the kneeling position, as if buried in the same pose as when their heads were cleaved from their necks. While you may expect people who have been beheaded to have some kind of defensive injuries, these skeletons don't. They don't have any signs of trauma directly before death, meaning they didn't fight back. This has led the archaeologists to theorize that the deaths were organized, probably part of some mass execution. It helps to know that the people living in this remote area of the Roman Empire or Roman-occupied Britain were farmers who provided grain and meat to the Roman armies. It's possible that when a group of Romans showed up to the farm, they didn't like what they saw and ordered the workers to be executed to keep the rest of the workers in line. It's not something that we can prove, but it is a solid theory. During the later part of Roman rule in Britain, deaths by execution climbed exponentially. State instability caused chaos and widespread violence at the hands of the Roman rulers. The Draco Rex. The Draco Rex is a relatively new type of dinosaur, new to science, but extremely old to the world. What makes it so fascinating is that it looks an awful lot like a dragon from a fairy tale. It has a long tail, 2 powerful legs, a bony head covered in spikes, and a pointy jaw that looks like it's capable of spitting fire. But in fact, the Draco Rex is not a dragon at all. It belongs to a group of dinosaurs called pachycephalosaurs, which translates roughly to bone-headed dinosaurs. And even though this creature looks like a savage predator, something that would stalk the prehistoric world, feasting on anything smaller than it, that's not the case. It was actually a plant eater. It lived throughout Asia and North America during the late Cretaceous, from between roughly 95 to 66 million years ago. The Draco Rex is a fairly new specimen, the newest member of the Pachycephalosaurus family. Paleontologist Robert Bacher called it a remarkable milestone in the world of paleontology. He says the discovery of the Draco Rex proves that even when the dinosaurs were ending, right at the very end before the asteroid struck, they were still evolving. This particular breed of beasts combined primitive features with more evolved ones, such as unique knobs and spikes on its head for defense. Fish with hands. A strange fish with hands has been spotted by scientists in Australia. The scientists who found this bizarre creature compared seeing this unusual sea dweller to finding a needle in a haystack. It's called the pink handfish, and it looks like any other fish, except that it scuttles around on the seafloor using its bright red hands. The fish is so rare that it hadn't been seen in over 20 years. The most recent sighting came thanks to an underwater camera put beneath Tasman Fracture Marine Park. Researchers were thrilled when the camera picked up the handfish, the first one seen by human eyes since 1999. It's strange that the fish is so elusive considering it lives in shallow water. Scientists say it must be critically endangered, otherwise there would likely be more sightings of them. There may only be a handful of them left, crawling around on the seafloor off the coast of Australia and Tasmania at the depth of around 300 feet. And in case you were wondering, these creatures really do crawl. They look absolutely bizarre, with a pair of feet or hands on the bottom of their body and then some longer hands extending from the sides, off of what look like extremely stubby pink arms. Their bright red eyes, pink lips, unusual appendages, and dorsal fin make these rare and likely endangered fish look like some kind of Pokemon. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Water on Mars. Astronomers have made a very strange discovery on the red planet. Observations have led to the suggestion that liquid water was flowing on Mars as recently as 2 billion years ago. That was before life on Earth began, but still fairly recent in the galactic timeline of the universe. Scientists use data from NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter to identify chloride salt deposits left behind by flowing water. After studying dozens of images of these salt deposits, scientists were able to date when they were made. Instead of water being on Mars 3 billion years ago, now it was still flowing 2 billion years ago. What makes this so mysterious is that if water had been flowing for so long on the surface of the planet, it could easily have hosted life for much of its geological history. That said, we still don't know what kind of life may have been living on Mars, just when exactly that life went extinct, or where we're going to find proof of it. The good news is that it now appears water was present for long enough on the planet's surface to potentially have spawned some form of life. Scientists still believe there is an underground reservoir beneath the surface of the South Pole where liquid water could still be trapped. The haunted house. A woman named Caroline Humphreys says she lives in the most haunted house in the world, or at least one of them. She and her family moved into the house when she was only 8 years old. The house is actually an old British inn called the Ancient Ram Inn, located in the small town of Watton-under-Edge. When her parents purchased the property in 1968, it was already 1,000 years old. Her parents turned it into a bed and breakfast, and through the years they have found some pretty shocking things inside its walls. More specifically, the family has found a number of bones. Piles of bones, jawbones, spines, skulls, femur bones, you name it. Caroline's father was the first to discover a stack of human bones beneath the living room flagstones. And to make things even creepier, the bones were accompanied by a set of strange-looking daggers. In more recent days, Caroline's partner discovered another stockpile of bones hiding beneath the staircase. The family has never figured out where the bones came from, but because of the presence of the ritual daggers, as well as a strange meeting with a diviner, they believe it has something to do with sacrificial killings. When Caroline had a diviner visit her house, the spiritual medium claimed there were children buried all throughout the property. It could very well be that the home was used in ritualistic killings as far back as 500 years ago, perhaps even by witches. Caroline's partner also discovered a mummified cat inside of the wall during renovation work. If you discovered piles of human bones or mummified animals in your home, would you stay? Let me know in the comments. Black and red moon plants. NASA's Artemis program is the newest attempt to return American astronauts to the moon. This is a very real program that NASA is currently undertaking to establish a permanent colony on the lunar surface. It will be a base at first, then hopefully grow into something more sustainable. One of the key aspects of creating a stable population on the moon is the ability to grow life in lunar soil. In other words, NASA needs to figure out how to turn moon dust into usable soil for crops. And believe it or not, they are making some shocking progress. A new study was carried out by a team of horticulturalists from the University of Florida. They managed to get small soil samples which were brought back from the 6 Apollo moon landing missions. They got approximately 12 grams of soil to complete their experiment. And what they discovered is that plants can indeed be grown in lunar soil, but they just don't look quite right. The researchers grew these same plants in small thimbles, which are normally used for growing cell cultures. Each thimble had a grab of soil amounting to about a teaspoon. They used pure moon dirt and had a control of volcanic ash, which is the closest thing on Earth to lunar soil. Plants actually grew in the moon dirt and in the volcanic ash, but what the researchers discovered was that the plants that sprouted in the moon soil were smaller and had black and red discoloration. Scientifically, what this means is that the plants grew poorly. In the grand scheme of things, plants might be able to grow on the moon, but they're going to be sick-looking with red and black coloring instead of green. An ancient sea screw. Back in the 1990s, something strange was found embedded in a piece of rock. It looks to be a perfectly preserved screw, practically fossilized. The strangest part about this particular discovery was that researchers supposedly managed to date the object to being somewhere near 300 million years old. There is no debating the shape of the object discovered in the rock. It clearly looked remarkably similar to a modern-day screw, unlike anything found naturally in the world. This led people to speculate that there was a highly advanced human civilization hundreds of millions of years before humans evolved on Earth. Either that, or there were aliens living on the planet with their own technology back when humans were still in the distant future. No one knows the truth. The object has been a point of debate for nearly 30 years. The group in possession of the ancient screw isn't making things any clearer or easy to verify their claims. They haven't given the supposed screw to any other scientists for testing, which has led experts to dismiss their claim as fake. Additionally, scientists have already come up with a different explanation. The best hypothesis put forward by experts who have seen the photos of the supposed screw is that it's actually an ancient creature. They say the screw shape is a marine creature called a crinoid. There are over 600 species of these creatures that are extinct right now, with several still alive today in our modern seas. They have changed a lot over the years, but have been around in more or less the same form since 440 million years ago. The fossilized screw looks identical to a fossilized crinoid. Dozens of new species are discovered every year. It's not every day that a new dinosaur is discovered, but it happens more often than you might think, especially with new technology. In 2021 alone, scientists identified 42 previously unknown dinosaur species. And this number isn't unusual. Since 2003, an average of 45 dinosaurs have been discovered every year. Writing for National Geographic, Michael Greshko described the current era as a golden age of paleontology that's transforming our understanding of the prehistoric world. There are more scientists in more parts of the world working on the ground and behind the scenes to find and study fossils than there used to be, according to Tom Holtz, who maintains a database of new discoveries. Plus, who doesn't love dinosaurs? Experts are also discovering new species by taking a closer look at fossils in storage and narrowing down their definition of what separates one species from the next. For example, a collection of fossils spanning tens of millions of years were once collectively labeled as the iguanodon species. But scientists re-examined the evidence and noticed some differences they missed before. The iguanodon fossils have since been reclassified as several different species. Arguably, one of the most interesting dinosaurs discovered this year is Spikecomelus afer, an armored species that had large spikes protruding from its ribs. It lived in northern Morocco between 168 million and 164 million years ago and is the oldest known dinosaur of its type, called an ankylosaur. These spiky armored dinosaurs are pretty cool, with a large club tail that they would use to bash their enemies. Even though it was an herbivore, even a T-Rex would be a fool to mess with this dinosaur. What's your favorite dinosaur? Let me know in the comments below. Mysterious ancient geometry tablet. The oldest known example of applied geometry is a clay tablet that dates back to 3,700 years ago. It was created in Babylon and is the only example we have today of a cadastral document. That's a fancy term for a land survey map, once used to define property lines. In other words, someone in old Babylon used geometry in the real world to mark the boundaries of a certain piece of property. The tablet shows highly advanced knowledge of right angles and triangles, a knowledge that wasn't seen again for over 1,000 years. Not until the Greek mathematician Pythagoras came up with his famous theorem, the one we still learn in high school today. The clay tablet is called Psi 427. The mystery behind it is that archaeologists don't know how the ancient Babylonian civilization became so mathematically sophisticated. It shows they obviously had a deep understanding of trigonometry, and yet this knowledge appears to have been lost with them until the Greeks learned it themselves much later. Where did they get the knowledge, and why wasn't it passed on to other civilizations after the fall of Babylon? Escaping a tsunami. 3,600 years ago, the Thera volcano exploded. It unleashed a series of massive tsunamis in the Aegean Sea that decimated the Mediterranean area. For the first time, archaeologists have found the shocking remains of a young man and his dog. who were caught and killed in one of these tsunamis. It's sad and fascinating for two reasons. First of all, archaeologists have never actually found a human victim from this particular eruption in the archaeological context. Secondly, the location in Turkey where the man and his dog were found is new evidence of the northernmost area affected by the tsunamis caused by the Thera volcano. The remains were found during excavations in the small town of Sesme. It all started when construction workers building a new complex of apartments found ruins from the Bronze Age. Once archaeologists got involved, they started noticing much of the devastation in the town was caused by a sudden onset of water. And since they could date the site's destruction back to 1600 BC, they connected it directly to the volcano. Scientists say it was one of the worst natural disasters that humans ever saw, with the volcano unleashing an eruption over 2 million times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. The blast wiped out the town of Akrotiri and helped collapse the entire Minoan civilization. It was so intense that it caused a global volcanic winter as far away as China. Sadly, the man and his dog, if indeed it was his, appear to have been trying to run away from the tsunami when they got caught. The pair got slammed against a wall by the massive wave. There they drowned, and there they were buried for over 3,000 years by the rubble. Lost world in a sinkhole. Cave explorers in the south of China have come across something shocking and unbelievable. In 2022, when pretty much every last corner of the world has been explored, they found an entirely lost kingdom of nature hiding deep underground. These explorers uncovered a never-before-seen sinkhole, an enormous pit in the ground going over 630 feet deep. It's basically a huge natural well, only one that's bursting with fantastic forms of life. There were new species of animals, new kinds of plants, and who knows what kind of ancient fossils hidden in the bedrock. It is made up of 3 caves and measures 5 million cubic meters, the equivalent of 2,000 Olympic swimming pools. Right now, we don't know if there are any new things inside of the sinkhole, but there definitely could be. There is a lush forest at the bottom, with mysterious plants that grow to be taller than some people, and trees over 130 feet high, growing from soil on the bottom. It literally felt to the explorers as if they were descending into some subterranean mirror world filled with dinosaurs and extinct beasts. At least that's what they said. Because the discovery was just made, we don't have all the scientific information. We know it's in the Guangxi Shuang Autonomous Region, according to the Chinese government. This is an area famous for its dense forests, huge limestone formations, and serpentine cave systems. Chances are, if this sinkhole went undiscovered until just recently, there could be even more mysterious underground ecosystems that haven't been found, ones with new and exciting animals that have never been documented. Glowing snow. Scientists were left baffled by the bizarre discovery of glowing snow in the Russian Arctic. Mikhail Naritin, the son of a molecular biologist, made the discovery while walking through the snow with his 2 dogs. This was near a remote field station on the White Sea coast. Much to his surprise, when he made a snowball, he found the snow would glow more brightly the harder he squeezed it. The more pressure, the brighter the snow. When he looked behind him, he saw that his footprints were glowing a vibrant blue. Even the dog's footprints were glowing. The boy ran to get his father, and together they collected some snow and took it back to their laboratory at the field station. They then observed a sample as it defrosted under a microscope. What they found was that the snow was filled with aquatic organisms known as copepods. These are small crustaceans that can be found in both fresh and saltwater habitats. It wasn't actually the snow that was glowing, but the very tiny copepods. The glowing organisms were not a revelation, since the species is known to glow in the ocean. The beautiful phenomenon can be seen along coasts all over the world, but it's never before been seen on land, never mind in the snow. This was the very first time the phenomenon was documented in the Arctic. Scientists have yet to figure out how the organisms made it from the sea into the Arctic snow, and are still investigating. What would you do if you noticed that your snowball was glowing? Let me know in the comments. Perfectly preserved embryo. At least 66 million years ago, in what is now the city of Ganzhou in southern China, a dinosaur egg was buried in a mudslide. The poor little baby dino inside didn't stand a chance, but the rapid burial kept its remains away from scavengers. Scientists unearthed the fossilized embryo in 2000, but only recently took a closer look at it. They are describing it as the best preserved dinosaur embryo ever found. Nicknamed Baby Yingliang, the ancient reptile was curled into a tucking position. This demonstrates a link between dinosaurs and modern birds, who assume a similar posture shortly before hatching. It also shows that some modern bird behaviors evolved among the dinosaurs, according to Dr. Fian Weissam Ma. The embryo was a type of toothless dinosaur called an oviraptorosaur, whose name translates to egg thief lizard. It was just about to hatch and had grown to about 10.6 inches long when it died. Oviraptorosaurs lived throughout North America and Asia between 166 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous period. Researchers plan to use advanced scanning techniques to create a full image of the baby dinosaur's skeleton, which is still partially covered by rock. A wolfish mutation. Scientists have recently discovered a rare mutation in wolves from over 50,000 years ago. This mutation can be found today in very small-sized dogs like Chihuahuas and Pomeranians. Whereas most people believe humans are solely responsible for breeding miniature canines, that's actually not the case. The mutation behind incredibly tiny dogs goes back way before humans ever started breeding anything. The mutation was found in the growth factor 1 gene as part of a study done by the National Institutes of Health Dog Genome Project. The gene was found in tiny dogs alive today, as well as from fossils of Siberian wolves that lived 54,000 years ago. In fact, the gene can be found in every canid species living today. This includes coyotes, jackals, and domesticated dogs. Elaine Ostrander, a geneticist working on the project, said it's as if nature kept the gene tucked away in her back pocket until humans started utilizing it. In other words, the gene was always there to turn giant wolves into tiny chihuahuas, but humans began playing around with breeding and were the ones to unlock it. Spanish bomb. In January of 2022, a Civil War bomb was discovered in the Spanish town of Zaragoza. The story of its discovery is not only shocking, but a little traumatic. There was a building in the town undergoing some renovations. A local resident who survived the Spanish Civil War of 1936 to 1939 happened to be walking by when he saw the work being done. He remembered that as a child, fascist bombers had dropped explosives directly on that building, but not all of them blew up. It happened when he was only 6 years old, 80 years before these renovations were being done. The citizen was concerned that the renovators might accidentally find the unexploded bombs and set them off. He warned them, explained his traumatic story from the Civil War, and work on the building was halted. A special group came in with metal detectors to see if there really were unexploded bombs. And sure enough, they discovered one massive bomb that had been dumped by the Italian Air Force fighting for Francisco Franco during the war. It was huge and would have exploded with enough force to bring the whole building down. It was lucky the man walked by when he did, and even luckier that he had such a good memory. Tracks at White Sands. Footprints from the Ice Age were found in White Sands National Park in New Mexico. Footprints of giant ground sloths, several packs of dire wolves, ancient camels, and footprints from mammoths that stood 13 feet tall. But it's not the ancient beasts that have gotten scientists excited about the discovery. Alongside the tracks of these extinct creatures, researchers found human footprints as well. These footprints tell a fascinating story. By doing forensic analysis of the prints, researchers were able to discover one person who had made a journey and then came back the same day. They also found the footprints of a person who came through the area in a hurry, carrying a child with them. These prints crisscrossed with those of an enormous ground sloth, which the experts were able to determine had stopped, stood on its massive hind legs, and sniffed the air, probably smelling the scent of humans who had recently gone by. Humans first arrived in North America about 13,000 years ago, but more and more evidence like these footprints is pushing that date even further back, to thousands of years earlier. Underground alien structure. UFO researchers believe they have just discovered an ancient underground alien structure hiding in Antarctica. They made the discovery by looking at satellite images of the continent via Google Earth. In the middle of the ice and snow, there appeared to be some kind of structure half excavated. Even more shocking is that when the researchers changed the time, and looked at earlier satellite images, they saw that the alien-like structure was gone. Instead, there was an airport runway carved through the snow, dozens of trailers surrounding a large mound of ice, and what looked like scientific and military vehicles. Putting the pieces together, it really looks as if the military stumbled upon something extraordinary, maybe even extraterrestrial. They then brought in their equipment to excavate it, revealing an underground structure that had been buried for an undetermined amount of time. Either that, or they were building their very own military installation deep in Antarctica, where it would be hidden from prying eyes. Either way, it's a weird discovery that's only being talked about by fringe internet scientists. What do you think? Secret military installation? Alien discovery? Something else? Tell me your theories below. Unusual tale. 3 years ago, paleontologists discovered the remains of a recently described dinosaur called Stegosaurus elengasen at the Cerro Guido site in southern Chile. The plant-eating creature lived in the region between 75 and 71 million years ago, measuring nearly 7 feet long and weighing around 330 pounds. At first, the team thought it was an already known dinosaur species, but when they examined its tail, they found that it was different from anything they'd ever seen before. It was lined with bony plaques called osteoderms, giving it a large, fern-like shape. According to a new study, the fossil could represent an entire new lineage of armored dinosaurs that have never been seen before in the southern hemisphere, but are already known to exist in the northern hemisphere. Team member Sergio Soto said that the researchers don't know why the tail evolved like it did. He further explained that armored dinosaurs had a tendency to independently evolve different defense mechanisms. Located 1,800 miles south of Santiago, Cerro Guido is a dinosaur fossil hotspot. Paleontologists have found ample evidence that South America and Antarctica were very close to one another back when the prehistoric reptiles existed, including 2 dinosaurs closely related to Stegosaurus. What do you think of this unique tail shape? Let me know in the comments below. Mysterious Celtic sword. While surveying the site of an ancient Celtic village near the town of Crudym in East Bohemia, archaeologists stumbled upon a small trove of mysterious artifacts. Included among the artifacts was a sword dating back to the 2nd century BC. It's 2,000 years old, likely once wielded by a Celtic warrior of some renown. Almost as fascinating as the sword is just how the unexpected discovery was made. According to archaeologist David Vitch, the field in which they uncovered the treasure had recently been plowed. This created a unique opportunity to scan the entire field with metal detectors and easily pull out any iron artifacts. It almost seems like just beneath the surface of almost every field in Europe is some ancient trove of treasure waiting to be discovered. Aside from the sword, they also found arrow spikes and pieces of buckles. The sword was almost definitely fashioned by an early Celtic blacksmith. It's sharp on both sides for slashing left and right. Its tip is blunt and there is a rib in the middle of the blade. The handle of the sword was most likely made from leather, but has already decayed. The sword is in pretty rough shape, bent in form and curved. When it was first made, however, it would have been a truly remarkable weapon. As for why it was found in the field, that's a bit of a mystery. The Celts did start out by burying their dead with grave goods to help prepare them for the afterlife. But in the later years, when this sword was used, the Celts had started burning their dead. There is a huge gap in the archaeological record because the Celts simply burned everything and left no trace behind. This sword may have been lost or even left behind after a great battle. The Surgeon's House. The Surgeon's House is a remarkable old building in the Italian city of Rimini, situated in the beautiful Piazza Ferrari. It was first discovered in 1989 and underwent 18 years of excavations before finally being opened to the public. The house was a residential building during the Roman period, built in the 2nd century AD. It's called the Surgeon's House because of all the surgical equipment found by archaeologists. They discovered over 150 pieces of surgical tech, from scales and containers to preservations and medicines. They even found a therapeutic vase made for a person's foot. But the truly shocking discovery was in the surgeon's operating room, where he took care of his patients. There was a small hoard of coins abandoned at around the year 260 AD. Archaeologists also found a very peculiar device used specifically for extracting arrowheads. Adjacent to the surgeon's house is the ruin of a palace, which was destroyed in the 6th century AD. It was during this period that Rimini found itself in the center of a war between the Goths and the Byzantine Greeks. The palace was buried after the fighting and later became the location for a Christian cemetery. The Christians hacked apart the mosaic floors of the palace and buried bodies literally inside its foundation, making the later excavations of the area truly shocking. The wow signal. A new development has been made over 40 years after the infamous wow signal was recorded. For a quick refresher, this signal was captured on the night of August 15, 1977. It was captured by the SETI program, which stands for the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. On that night, a one-of-a-kind signal from deep in space was picked up by a radio telescope. Nothing like it has been captured since, and nobody has ever been able to identify it. It's become such a mystery that most people believe it was some random output from an alien vessel passing by many thousands of light years away. As it turns out, we might now know where the wow signal came from. Astronomer Alberto Caballero began looking for stars similar to our own in the Sagittarius constellation. His theory is that if the signal really did come from intelligent life, they had probably been a byproduct of a star similar to ours. He identified an interstellar object with almost the exact temperature, diameter, and luminosity of our own home star, the Sun. It's about 1,800 light-years away. As it turns out, we might now know where the wow signal came from. While we haven't actually identified any potential aliens yet, or found the origin of the signal, we at least have a much better idea of where to look for them. The Little Ice Age and the Great Dying. Scientists have discovered new evidence regarding the Little Ice Age of the 1600s and the Great Dying of indigenous people in South America. It's been estimated that in the century after Europeans arrived in the Americas, over 50 million indigenous people died. They died as a result of slavery, warfare, and epidemics. This terrible part of history is called the Great Dying. In 2019, scientists in the UK proposed that in the areas of forest where the native people had been killed off, the forests regrew and helped cause a miniature ice age. Because the native people had cleared the land when the Europeans came and eradicated them, that land regrew as wild forest. The new trees then absorbed enough carbon for there to be a dip in the global atmospheric CO2 levels. This anomaly caused the entire world to get just a little colder in the 17th century. However, an even newer study done by Mark Bush from the Florida Institute of Technology and his colleagues have revealed that this might not be the case at all. They used radiocarbon dating to trace sediments from the bottoms of 39 lakes throughout the Amazon basin. They did find evidence of forest clearing and burning, and of regrowth, but they doubt that the amount of regrowth contributed to a dip in CO2. A new type of dinosaur. Sea levels were much higher some 70 million years ago than they are today. At the time, a duck-billed dinosaur called Parasaurus missouriensis lived along the eastern shore of the Western Interior Seaway, an inland sea that once divided what is now North America. It was an enormous creature, growing up to 35 feet long by adulthood. In recent years, a paleontologist named Guy Duro discovered the fossilized remains of a young P. missouriensis dinosaur at a site in Missouri, where he's been working for 40 years. It was roughly the size of a Volkswagen and wasn't done growing when its life was suddenly cut short. Scientists recently identified the creature as both a new species and genus. A wealth of fossils have been found along the former western shore of the Seaway, but the Missouri site represents one of the few known sites that was along the Seaway's eastern shore. Pete Makovicki, a curator of dinosaurs at Chicago's Field Museum, described the site as one of the most unique he's ever seen out of the many dinosaur fossil sites he's explored throughout the world. The location is being kept a secret for now while researchers work to secure their findings. And this is probably not the last of the discoveries there. Makovicki said that he believes there are even more dinosaurs in the area, waiting to be found. Beaver throwing darts. Scientists with the Canadian Conservation Institute recently discovered a throwing dart 6,000 years old. But stranger than that is that it was made from beaver secretion.
It's the earliest use ever documented of humans using castoreum in the making of a weapon. Castoreum is a product that only comes from the anal sac of beavers. The dart, known as an ancient atlatl, was found near Alligator Lake in the Yukon, which is near the border of Canada and Alaska. It was found in the melting alpine ice, where two groups of indigenous people once lived, the Carcross Tagish and the Kwanlin Dun. These ancient people were mainly hunters who stayed in the region because of the abundance of caribou and sheep. In recent years, as the ice has continued to melt, more and more interesting indigenous artifacts have been found, from tools to weapons. The dart is a lot bigger than you probably think. It was almost 7 feet long, made out of birch wood. At one end was a point fixed to the wood with sinew wrappings. The other end was adorned with feathers. The ancient indigenous people would have used it for hunting big game. As for the beaver secretion, it was used as an adhesive to keep all of the different pieces in place. It was basically used as superglue to keep the point, the feathers, and the 3 sections of the dart strong and sturdy. The real mystery here is how in the world the indigenous people figured out that by milking the anal gland of a beaver, they could get an adhesive. The discovery process must have been extremely bizarre. Viking Cave of Doom. Researchers in Iceland came across a trove of very rare artifacts from 1,000 years ago. The artifacts were discovered inside a mysterious cave of doom. Called that because it is a tunnel formed by lava flows at the edge of a dormant volcano. These artifacts include a stone structure shaped like a boat, some beads from the Middle East, and the burned bones of animals. But the stone boat, carved like an altar in the cave, is by far the most interesting. Experts theorize it was used as part of a ritual ceremony to keep Ragnarok from destroying the world. In Viking mythology, Ragnarok was the end of everything. It was a fiery apocalypse in which the gods would come down from above and wipe out humanity. And since they didn't really want that to happen, they made sacrifices in the cave to keep the gods from raining terror down upon them. And here's where things get truly interesting. The Vikings had only recently colonized Iceland. After they arrived, this volcano exploded in welcome. The destruction, the fire, the smoke, it all would have been so terrifying that the Vikings thought Ragnarok was coming. When the lava cooled and the volcano calmed down, they immediately went into one of the hollow lava chambers, built an altar, and started making sacrifices to keep the volcano from ever exploding again. Ancient Egyptian Cobra. A team of researchers at the Mansoura University Vertebrate Paleontology Center recently discovered the oldest fossil ever of an Egyptian cobra. The fossil dates back 37 million years during the Eocene epoch. This was a period in history with some seriously impressive diversification of reptiles. Snakes, lizards, legless lizards, and all kinds of scaly creatures were living on the planet, and that includes this incredibly ancient relative of the modern cobra. Even cooler is that it wasn't found in a faraway place, but right in its natural home of Egypt. The fossil was discovered in the Fayum Depression, meaning cobras have been a persistent part of Egypt for pretty much all of time. The Fayum Depression wasn't always a wasteland. It was once a rich and vibrant rainforest full of dinosaurs, mammals, and enormous serpents. Rock art in the Scottish Highlands. Strange stone carvings dating back hundreds of years have been found in the Scottish Highlands by an amateur archaeologist. The prehistoric artwork is located on the mountain of Ben Lars, but it's not the kind of art you're probably thinking of. There are no bizarre images of alien figures or curious hybrid animals. Instead, the art consists of cup and ring marks. Helen Cole from the National Trust of Scotland says the discovery is highly unusual because the rock has way more cup marks than normal, at least 90 on a single piece of stone. There are also some linear grooves, but no one is quite sure what those mean. Then again, what the artwork means is a mystery as well. It's similar to other pieces of prehistoric rock art found in the Scottish hills, all of which are a complete enigma. They all seem to show the same symbols, rings, as if someone had laid cups all over the stones and their bottoms left ring marks. All the experts can say for sure is that the Scottish Highlands was a significant landscape in prehistory. It's just nobody knows why the ancient people from hundreds and thousands of years ago felt the need to imprint rings into every piece of rock they came across. Ancient Velociraptor relative. Over 100 million years ago, during the early Cretaceous period,
A fierce bird-like dinosaur hunted on the Isle of Wight in what is now the English Channel, using its strength to overpower its prey and its huge talons to shred its next meal. Then, using its finely serrated teeth, it bit into its victim's flesh. Yikes! The ancient creature was related to the velociraptor, but was older and had a more robust build. It was about the size of a wolf, measuring roughly 10 feet long from nose to tail. Although it wasn't the biggest predator in its habitat, it posed a formidable threat to small and young dinosaurs. In 2004, erosion caused by storms and waves revealed a fossilized dino on the beach. Scientists recently identified it as a new species named Vectiraptor greeneye. It's the first large raptor ever found in England. Vectiraptor and other raptors were ancestors of modern birds. They were covered in long feathers and were armed with sharp teeth and had large, scythe-shaped claws. These fearsome predators often slashed their prey, causing them to bleed to death, and researchers suspect that they may have used their talons for climbing trees. Because of its heavy build, Vectiraptor probably relied much more on strength than speed to catch prey. The discovery adds to a growing body of evidence that proves that dinosaurs were incredibly diverse, according to study leader Dr. Nick Longrich. Dr. Longrich explains that even after more than a century of investigating the Isle of Wight and other parts of England, dinosaur discoveries are still frequently being made. In some cases, he said, finding new fossils is simply a waiting game that requires scientists to remain on standby until sea cliffs break or waves wash the specimens out from the rocks. When dinosaurs existed, the continents were closer to one another, and some were even still connected by land bridges, enabling dinosaurs to wander all over the world. The Isle of Wight, and Europe in general, seem to have served as a crossroads for dinosaurs that were passing through, on their way to or from North America and Asia. They may have also swam to Europe from Africa. What do you think about this new discovery? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. Lost Oxford College. New excavations in Oxford have unveiled the site of a mysterious lost college from medieval days that hasn't been seen since the middle of the 16th century. It's called St. Mary's College, and it was originally founded in 1435. However, within just 100 years, it had fallen into a state of disrepair and was unusable. It then vanished from all historical records and was assumed destroyed. Only now, the college limestone foundations have been found by a research team from Oxford Archaeology. The foundations were found near Oxford city centre, a place that's been occupied continuously since the 11th century. But how did colleges work in the 1400s? St. Mary's was built around the same time as the Lincoln and Magdalen colleges, all of them strange combinations of learning houses and religious buildings. College learning was reserved for those who were devout as well. Construction on St. Mary's was slow. It wasn't until the early part of the 16th century that it received enough funding to become a true college. By the 1530s, it had a two-story library, a chapel, and its own college kitchens. Shortly after 1535, the college was closed. 5 years later, it had fallen into ruin and was plundered for building materials. It was around this time that the college vanished from the records. Archaeologists believe it was taken apart, and its salvaged pieces used in the building of a nearby church tower. 600 years later, its ruins were found by archaeologists who excavated the site prior to the construction of student housing for Brasenose College. Even after all of these centuries, this site is still a place for education. Mysterious murals. What began as an ordinary renovation project to convert a historic building into a public bar turned into an archaeological project to restore artwork. A couple named Nick and Lisa purchased a building in a small Washington town called Okanagan, about 4 hours from Seattle. But as they were tearing down the walls in late 2021, they found giant murals painted on canvases, each one over 60 feet long. They were shocked to find that their house came with old artwork. As it turned out, the artwork wasn't that ancient. It came from 1907, when the building was a movie theater, pool hall, and rooster fighting arena. That's right, cockfights. Washington in 1907 was a crazy place, where you could go to see a movie, play a game of pool, and watch two birds fight to the death.
The couple managed to find newspaper clippings from 1915 that show the murals when they were first painted. They were originally improvements for the Hub Theater, 120 feet of panoramic landscape. Now that the couple know what they have in their building, they'll be refurbishing the artwork and keeping it right where it's been for over 100 years. What would you do if you discovered artwork in your home? Restore it? Sell it? Keep it? Tell me in the comments. The Floating City. In 2015, footage appeared online of a mysterious city floating in the clouds over another city in China. The video shocked the world because it really did look as though the city was just kind of hovering in the sky, like some ghost town with buildings rising up past the clouds. But this wasn't a fake video, it wasn't a secret hoax, and it wasn't an actual floating city. According to atmospheric scientist Peggy Lamone, it was just a mirage. A really exciting and convincing mirage, but an illusion nonetheless. It's actually called a superior mirage or a fata morgana, meaning it was an upward projected mirage. Cold air near the ground with a warm layer of air above that must have created a temperature inversion. This is a reversal of what normally happens in the atmosphere. The result was that as light rays passed from one mass of air into the next, they bent in a highly unusual way that tricked our brains. And so, simply because of some hot and cold air, this city appeared to the human eye as if it was hundreds of feet higher than in reality, floating up in the atmosphere. This kind of thing isn't even that uncommon. When people describe seeing ships flying above the ocean, they're really just dealing with a fata morgana. All these rays of light fool our brains. We're presented with a hallucination in the real world, and suddenly there are floating cities and flying ships. A strange discovery at Petra. A strange new discovery has been made at the ancient city of Petra. Archaeologists were shocked when they discovered evidence of white sandstone in the remains of this lost city. It was a surprise because the valley in which Petra was built is filled with nothing except red sandstone. They now believe the presence of the white stone is a hint as to how the powerful civilization declined and went extinct. Petra was built as a thriving hub for culture, politics, and economics by the Nabateans. These were the dwellers of the desert in what is now modern Jordan, and the gatekeepers of trade through the region. The Greeks were so jealous of the wealth being accumulated by the Nabateans that they tried to take Petra in the year 312 BC, but they failed. When the Romans arrived centuries later in 106 AD, they did not fail. Petra was annexed, renamed Arabia Petraea, and the Romans took over the city for the next 250 years, while the Nabatean people were slowly erased. It was in the 4th century that a massive earthquake ripped the city of Petra apart and caused its importance to wane. It was also around this time that sea routes were becoming much more popular for trade, extinguishing the old Silk Road. But archaeologist Tom Paradise doesn't believe this is the whole story. He and his team uncovered beds of massive white sandstone in 2017. It didn't belong in the city. He believes that the mysterious chunks of stone are evidence that it wasn't just an earthquake that destroyed Petra, but a massive flood of over 20 feet. The white sandstone was brought from far away and swept through Petra on massive waves, ultimately sealing the fate of the city. Massive sea monsters grew really fast. During the dinosaur age, a group of ancient marine reptiles called ichthyosaurs lived throughout the world's oceans. A recent study found that they evolved to massive sizes over a 2.5 million year span at the very beginning of their 150 million year existence. That's an incredibly short amount of time, considering how it took modern whales roughly 90% of their 55 million year history to reach their enormous sizes that we see today. Ichthyosaurs experienced this rapid growth period at a time when the world was recovering from the Great Dying, a mass extinction event that occurred at the end of the Permian period. Researcher Lars Schmitz described it as a glimmer of hope and a sign of the resilience of life. He went on to say that if environmental conditions are right, evolution can happen very fast, and life can bounce back. The recent findings were based on a fossilized ichthyosaur found in the Augusta Mountains of northwestern Nevada. The newly described species lived around 247 million years ago during the Triassic period. Its skull was roughly 6.5 feet long, indicating that its body was at least 55 feet long.
The strange sea creature probably weighed about 45 tons. It had evolved to its gargantuan size within 5 million years of the Great Dying. Based on the shape and size of the animal's teeth, experts believe it fed on fish, squid, and smaller ichthyosaurs. Ancient figurine. In Germany, a truck driver found a bronze statuette at the bottom of the Tolense River in 2020. It's one of only 13 bronze statuettes found in the region since 1840. Archaeologists believe it may have been part of an early weight system used by Scandinavians thousands of years ago. Either that, or it was a mysterious object of worship, perhaps depicting an unknown deity. Archaeologists aren't sure exactly what it was. By far, the strangest part of the whole thing is that the artifact was discovered by a truck driver. He was snorkeling during some time off in the marshy streams of the river when he made the discovery. He pulled the bronze figurine, about 6 inches tall, out of the muddy peat. The statuette has a head shaped like an egg, looped arms, and a really long nose. It's also depicted with a belt and a neck ring. Thomas Terberger from the Lower Saxony State Office says the artifact is an archaeological riddle. No one knows what it was, how it got into the river, or what it was used for. But this hasn't been the only remarkable thing to come out of the swamp. There have been the skeletons of horses found, military artifacts, and the remains of over 140 people who all died from blunt force trauma. Every single one of these mysterious finds has been traced to roughly 1250 BC. The suggestion is that something very violent happened here in a single day. Archaeologists don't know what happened, nor who was involved, but they do agree this is probably the oldest battle site in all of Europe. Remains of the Aztec. Archaeologists in Mexico made a breakthrough when they found a shocking array of human remains hidden underneath a pyramid. The discovery came from the ancient city of Teotihuacan. But to understand it better, we need to go back to 2003 and look at an older find from the area. Nearly 2 decades ago, professionals unveiled a tunnel in the bedrock beneath the Pyramid of the Sun. At first, they thought it was just a natural cave beneath the pyramid. But when they kept digging, they found a carved chamber hemmed by huge walls. These walls were originally designed to block access deeper into the complex. But of course, archaeologists managed to get past the walls and go deeper to the very end of the tunnel. Here they found nothing, as the tunnel had already been pillaged by robbers throughout the centuries. After all, Teotihuacan predates the Aztec by around 1,000 years. People have been coming in and out of these temples and pyramids since the Roman Empire was still around. Fast forward to 2017, when archaeologists uncovered a similar secret tunnel beneath the Feathered Serpent Pyramid. This tunnel had not been pillaged by robbers, so archaeologists pulled out over 100,000 different objects, some of them dating back over 1,800 years. They had been placed there as ritual offerings to mysterious old gods. Some of the artifacts included crocodile teeth, crystals shaped like eyes, and jaguar sculptures. They also found countless human bones. These poor people had undoubtedly been the victims of human sacrifice. The Gold Star Standard. Here's a fun fact for you. Our sun contains 67 different elements and roughly 2.5 trillion tons of gold. There's actually gold all over space, stuck inside stars and embedded in giant celestial rocks. But even more interesting is that 67 elements are inside our star. And now, for the first time in history, astronomers have finally found another star that contains almost the same number of elements. This one has 65, and it's in the neighborhood of the Milky Way and Matsukana constellation. It's being called the gold standard of stars by astronomers because it's allowing them a unique opportunity to study how some of the heaviest elements in the universe are created inside the raging bodies of stars. Its official name is HD 222925. It's unique in that it contains many elements, but not a lot of mass. It has extremely heavy elements like gold, but scientists don't believe that the gold and other heavy elements were created inside the star. They don't know where they came from or how such elements are formed out in the universe. What they think is that because of all the star's lighter elements, when it goes supernova, those elements will somehow end up producing heavy elements like gold, which will then end up being swallowed during the formation of a new star. Even stranger is that scientists don't believe the star originated in the Milky Way, but from a different part of the universe. That's why it's so unique.
However, figuring out how a giant star migrated across space is yet another mystery scientists have yet to solve.
The vegetable planet. Astronomers have just discovered a planet with one of the strangest shapes ever seen. Rather than looking like a spherical globe, like pretty much every planet, this one looks like a vegetable. An international team of astronomers working closely with the European Space Agency were on a mission to discover exoplanets when they found the vegetable planet. It's called WASP 103b. Believe it or not, it's bigger than the Sun and over 1.5 times larger than Jupiter. It's 1,500 light years away from us, circling an F-type star. So what kind of vegetable does it look like? Scientists say the planet is shaped like a potato. The scientists believe that because of its close proximity to its home star, tidal stresses have pulled the planet in such a way that it morphed from its original marble shape into that of a potato. It's less than 20,000 miles away from its star, and so all that gravity has kind of yanked it into an oblong, vegetable-like shape. Jurassic Park of fossilized footprints. In what's being described as the most spectacular dinosaur discovery ever made in Poland, scientists recently found hundreds of fossilized footprints dating back to the Jurassic period. Paleontologists made the incredible find in the country's central eastern region while examining sheets of rock that were discarded by miners. It's the largest collection of footprints of its type ever found in Europe. Researchers have found 60 blocks of rock containing the fossilized prints of carnivores, avian dinosaurs, and members of the sauropodomorph family, which includes the Brontosaurus. They roamed the Earth around 199 million years ago, when the town was a coastal region. Based on the size of the largest footprints, which measure up to 15.7 inches long, some of the dinosaurs that made them were as much as 20 feet tall. The prints are remarkably well preserved, leaving behind details of what the creature's claws and skin looked like. Not many dinosaur discoveries are made in Poland, which was largely underwater during much of the ancient reptile's existence. But scientists believe that there could be thousands of more fossils nearby waiting to be discovered. They will continue to excavate over the next several months. Ancient turkey blanket. The great ancestors of the Pueblo Indians, including the Hopi, Rio Grande Pueblos, and the Zuni, made some remarkably comfortable blankets. Archaeologists recently discovered a blanket made from around 11,000 turkey feathers in the American Southwest. The team from Washington State University analyzed the blanket and determined it to be over 800 years old. Still curious, they analyzed it even further to see just how it was made in the first place. What they discovered was that thousands of body feathers from turkeys were wrapped around 200 yards of yucca fiber cord to make the blanket. It took the feathers from between 4 and 10 turkeys to accomplish this. But what's even more interesting is that the ancient Puebloans didn't have to kill any animals to make the thousands of turkey blankets that would have been in circulation. The researchers found that they had probably harvested the feathers when the birds were naturally molting. This would have given them a sustainable collection of feathers throughout the year to create as many blankets as they wanted. This also explains the extreme reverence for turkeys still evident today in the Pueblo dances and rituals. In the 1200s, they used turkeys for everything. It wasn't until the 1600s that turkeys began to fall out of fashion. But before the Europeans arrived, turkeys were pretty much the only domesticated animal in North America. Viking gold men. On a hill in Sweden, a bronze Celtic mask was found in 2004. 8 years later, an archaeological team was dispatched to the area to conduct a full excavation. The team discovered a large number of trinkets, some of the most fascinating of which were gold foil heads of men and women. These gold Viking heads were likely used to decorate cauldrons during the Iron Age, over 1,000 years ago. The whole excavation became very mysterious very quickly. The team retrieved at least 29 anthropomorphic gold foil heads, but they also found Roman glass, bronze treasures, fragments of vessels, and coins from the Viking Age. Nobody knows if these artifacts were abandoned or left on the hill on purpose. Whatever the case, they came from a very turbulent time in European history. This was right after the fall of the West Roman Empire, and every tribe was on the move. This leaves 3 options for how the mysterious artifacts arrived buried at this particular hill. They may have been part of a ritual burial site, which would explain all the gold heads used for decorating cauldrons. or they may have been buried with the intent of being picked up later. Or they may have just been part of a huge drinking and feasting festival and then were left behind as the travelers moved on. Giant megalodon tooth. A remarkable treasure was found by a 6-year-old boy from the small village of Bradwell in the United Kingdom. His name is Sammy Shelton. He was with his dad walking along Bodsey Beach in Suffolk when from out of nowhere he saw something pointy sticking out of the sand. He reached down and grabbed the mysterious object, then was pleasantly surprised to see that he had found a tooth. But this wasn't an ordinary tooth. It had once belonged to a gigantic megalodon, the biggest species of shark that ever lived. The oldest remains ever discovered of a megalodon go back about 20 million years, with the most recent being 3.6 million years old. That means that for roughly 17 million years, this enormous shark dominated every ocean on the planet. They were huge, powerful, and ruthless. Picture a great white shark almost as big as a blue whale. According to the Natural History Museum in London, an adult megalodon could grow to at least 60 feet long. These days, there is not much left of the extinct great predators, just their teeth. Since sharks are mostly made out of cartilage, the teeth are the only thing that doesn't disintegrate and fossilize easily. Plus, a shark produces and sheds thousands upon thousands of teeth throughout their lifetime. Considering the megalodon lived all over the world for 17 million years, there are probably billions of fossilized megalodon teeth lost in the oceans. Every now and then, someone like Sammy gets extraordinarily lucky and finds one washed up on the beach. Have you ever found a megalodon tooth or a shark tooth? Let me know in the comments below. Galveston Island's ghost wolves. In Texas, there is a population of strange canids that scientists believe could help revive the highly endangered red wolf. They live on Galveston Island, and these canids, about the size of coyotes, prowl the beach at night with their eyes gleaming in the darkness. If you look closely, you can see that the Galveston Island wolves are a little unusual. Their legs are too long, they have broad heads and pointed snouts, and their fur is distinctly red. They also have white patches on their muzzles. This is because these canids contain rare bits of DNA from red wolves, American wolves that were declared extinct back in the 1980s. Yes, there used to be wolves that were red, and they lived in Texas. The discovery of the Galveston Island wolves and their genetic past is thanks to local resident Ron Wooten. The wolves ran off with his dog back in 2008, and that was when he took an interest in the creatures. He began studying them when everyone else assumed they were simply pests and a danger to their own pets. He then reached out to scientists, believing he had stumbled upon something really fascinating. And it turned out he was right. These wolves are descendants of the extinct red wolves, although mixed heavily with coyotes. It's unclear yet if scientists can use their DNA to help bring back the red wolf, but it's the closest hope they have. Italy's first dinosaur herd. Italy isn't well known for its dinosaur discoveries. In fact, until recently, only a handful of dinosaur specimens had been found throughout the country since the 1990s. Earlier this month, scientists announced the discovery of an entire herd of dinosaurs near the northeastern port city of Trieste. A team found the 11 ancient reptiles at a former limestone quarry, which is proving to be a treasure trove of dinosaur fossils. The findings are helping to add context to a previous discovery of a dinosaur named Antonio, who researchers believe was a member of the herd. When Antonio was found in 1996, scientists believed that he represented a dwarf species. But now that they have other specimens to compare him to, they think that he was a juvenile. The biggest and oldest member of the group, named Bruno, represents the largest and most complete dinosaur skeleton ever found in Italy. In addition to these doomed dinosaurs who roamed the earth around 80 million years ago, the team discovered the fossilized remains of fish, crocodiles, small shrimp, and flying reptiles, who called the ancient Mediterranean their home. Study leader Federico Fanti told The Guardian that at the time, the region was near the shoreline and the environment was warm, tropical, and humid. The recent discoveries are helping experts learn more about the habitat that the creatures lived and died in. A terrible shipwreck. Researchers with the Alabama Historical Commission have authenticated and confirmed the discovery of the last known slave ship active in the United States. Over 150 years ago, the Clotilda was bringing slaves ripped from their homeland in Benin, West Africa, to Alabama in the United States. Even after the United States of America banned the importation of slaves from Africa in the year 1808, demand continued to boom. The cotton trade was in full swing, and Alabama plantation owners weren't interested in obeying the law. They wanted slave labor to work their plantations no matter what the cost. In 1860, way after slavery importation had been outlawed, the Clotilda sailed from Mobile to what was then the Kingdom of Dahomey. Captain William Foster was in charge of the mission. He brought back a group of Africans that had been captured by a warring tribe. Captain Foster snuck the ship into Mobile Bay at night and up the river. He kept some slaves for himself and handed the rest over to a plantation owner. To get rid of the evidence, Captain Foster had the Clotilda moved upstream, burned, and sunk to the bottom of the river. After the Civil War in 1865, the Clotilda survivors tried to return to Africa but couldn't afford it, so they created a new town called Africatown. Their descendants grew up hearing about the ship and their homeland and wanted to prove the stories were true. Several organizations, including Search Inc. and the Smithsonian, came together to send archaeologists and divers to look for the ship for years. As the Smithsonian curator said, it's not just a search for a ship, but a search to find the history and identity of all the people who were brought against their will. Finally, after several decades, the ship was finally discovered at the bottom of the Mobile River, the Pilbara. Scientists have finally proved beyond a doubt that the Pilbara region of Western Australia is one of the oldest places on the planet, formed over 3.6 billion years ago. But wait, isn't all of the Earth the same age? Yes and no. Scientists looked at the vast formations of iron rock in the Pilbara region, a place over twice the size of Great Britain. And what they found is that much of the iron rock was formed before oxygen was ever on the planet, meaning way before any life took form. It's the best preserved example of the most ancient part of the Earth's crust. The surface of our planet is always changing because of geological activity. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, everything is always changing. It's been this way since the planet first formed. But some parts of the planet are much newer. For example, the Himalaya Mountains only appeared 50 million years ago. That's pretty young in the grand scheme of things. The whole region was flat, and then 50 million years ago, it turned into the highest point on Earth. That's what I mean by always changing. But scientists have now confirmed that the Pilbara region has never changed. According to Martin van Kranendonk from the University of New South Wales, it looks nearly the exact same as it did 3.6 billion years ago. It's managed to stay clear of every geological event and preserve itself perfectly. Looking at this region is like looking at the planet before a single organism ever existed here. World War I training tunnels. The Salisbury Plain in England is most famous for Stonehenge and a whole collection of other prehistoric sites. But recently, the Salisbury Plain yielded a much more recent archaeological treasure. Researchers discovered a mysterious network of tunnels dating back to the days of World War I. These passages were found underneath a military base, lost for over a century. They were found to be filled with grenades, old graffiti, and tins of uneaten war rations. When World War I started in 1914, this part of Salisbury Plain was a training ground for the British Army. It was here where combat engineers were trained on how to properly build tunnels and trenches. These tunnels were to be used during real warfare so that soldiers could dig underneath enemy lines and plant bombs. Archaeologists discovered these practice tunnels while conducting salvage excavations. The Army is building a new housing unit, so a bunch of ground had to be dug up. Archaeologist Martin Brown says the project turned into the biggest single investigation of World War I training trenches in the world. It's unclear how they went unnoticed for so long, but it looks to be one of those things where the entrance was covered, dirt shifted, and the whole place was buried. But perhaps the coolest part is the graffiti, which is most of the names of soldiers scratched into the walls for people to remember them years afterwards. Ancient giants. A strange discovery back in the 16th century convinced people living in London that giants were real. It was allegedly a leg bone, over 25 inches long. According to 16th century historian John Stowe, the locals all thought it was the shank bone of a human being, one of extraordinary size. There was a massive one on display at the Fair Parish Church of St. Lawrence. There was also another one on display at the parish church of St. Mary Aldermanbury. In truth, both of the giant leg bones came from a mammoth, but the local Londoners had no idea what a mammoth was in the 16th century and simply assumed the bones belonged to giants. Someone had dug them up from the dirt somewhere, brought them to the church, and it was declared the giants were real. It helped that there had been stories of giants for hundreds of years before the discoveries were made. On Ferdinand Magellan's voyage in 1520, he and his crew reported seeing giants on the beach when they landed in South America. It wasn't a huge stretch to believe that prehistoric giants had existed in London before humans showed up. Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon for more amazing videos. Bye!